After days of working overtime, I've finally finished this masterpiece series, The Regressor Who Creates Everything. Currently, the story is still ranked number 2 on Han Baumut's monthly charts. Alright, let's get right into the main story. A man casually crafts a scabbard, and it sends a shockwave through all the hunters in the examination hall. Even Ryu Ha, one of the most powerful hunters at present, wanted to immediately rush up and seize it. This scene made all the judges unable to believe their eyes, because the sword he created was radiating an incredibly terrifying pressure. After the system's appraisal, this fire attribute scabbard reached the super rare grade. It could both store and amplify magical power many times over. No one understood how a contestant could possess such frightening forging skills, but they didn't know that in his past life, this man was once the strongest blacksmith. Thanks to his forging talent, he created countless god-tier weapons for the heroes and then joined them in destroying the 6 demon gods of destruction. Yet, despite their victory, humanity could not survive. Because among those 6 demon gods of destruction, there was one known as the Sea of Destruction. Even though he was dead, most of the land was still swallowed by the Sea of Death he had created. Thinking of that, Se-jun couldn't help but let out a self-deprecating laugh. I barely managed to survive, only to end up dying in this. The surviving heroes also fell one by one, and even the tower of heroes that supported the continent collapsed. This damn sea of ruins, even with the demon god destroyed, it just won't disappear. Just then, a man's voice came from behind him. Are you really going to put on a one-man show here? Se-jun walked up to Se-jun. He frowned slightly upon seeing his disheveled state. Anyone who saw you would think you were carrying the whole world on your shoulders. Mad dog. Se-jun. Hearing this, Louis Vallon turned and shot back a provocative remark. The guy who was just lying around faking sick is now trying to act like a hero? Savage dog, Louis Vallon. Meanwhile, Amiya clutched her head and lamented. Geez, I told you before, didn't I? The boss is just trying to take all the credit after taking command of the Legion. Ice dog, Amiya. After a moment of silence, despite the group taking turns criticizing him, Se-jun coldly ordered, cut the crap. All of you would be pushing up daisies if it weren't for the gear I made for you. The last blacksmith, Se-jun. As soon as he finished speaking, Se-jun flew into a rage. What did you say? Over here, Louis Vallon couldn't help but comment, this guy's really got a sharp tongue. Amiya didn't forget to turn and add, boss, that was a little too harsh, you know. Right after, he spat out a curse, causing the atmosphere to suddenly become heavy and suffocating. All of you, shut the hell up. If you brats don't want to use it, then give all the gear back to me. In that moment, only one thought remained in Se-jun's mind. The 3 people standing before me are the 3 dogs. They don't side with humanity, nor do they belong to those damn demons. They act only as they please, always putting their own interests first. They are the ones who always stay on the sidelines to profit. Even though they're the most selfish bastards to the very end, they still managed to survive until this moment. And in the end, they were the ones who were most active. Thinking this, Se-jun vaguely wondered, if they had acted sooner, would the result have been better? Once again, his eyes were blinded by the sun at the edge of the sea. Se-jun casually sat down on the ground and glanced behind him. Anyone else still standing? Hearing this, Se-jun clutched his stomach and collapsed to his knees. He let out a dry sound. I'm at my limit. All my internal organs are ruptured. Louis Vallon looked up at the empty sky and spoke slowly. Things aren't any better over here. It seems to be a curse. The blood just won't stop flowing. Over here. Amiya was constantly groaning. My heart's been pierced. I don't think I'm gonna make it. Seeing this, Se-jun let out a helpless sigh. See, you all should have worked together from the start. Even as they were dying, he coldly cursed them for being so selfish, only caring about themselves. You 3 damn bastards. Suddenly, a loud thud drew Se-jun's attention. Se-jun, Louis, and Amiya had all collapsed. Faced with this scene, he calmly stood up, letting out a soft sigh, causing trouble even at the very end. Immediately after, Se-jun walked over step by step, gently grasping his hammer. Se-jun was seen raising the object into the air, his eyes fixed on the piece of metal below. After a long moment, he carefully drove the knives into the ground beside Amiya's body. At this moment, Se-jun's voice was hoarse with anger. You should treasure your equipment a little more. How can you use it when it's smashed to pieces like this? He thought to himself. At least this stuff can serve as their grave markers. When he was done, Se-jun looked up at the endless sky, standing silently amidst the howling sea wind, scoffing at himself. So, is it my turn now? Se-jun's cracked, blood-stained hand slowly rose, his gaze chillingly calm. This will be the last time I do this. Instantly, he slapped the center of his chest. Space trembled slightly as lines of light hovered in front of Se-jun, an emotionless voice echoing in his head. Commencing connection extraction from the subject, Se-jun. The connection level with the creator, Se-jun, has reached a negative level. A crystal then appeared in his hand. A faint blue light surrounded the invisible ore as the cold system explained. Unique skill. Connected blacksmith. Able to obtain a special ore from a target with a connection. The ore's effect depends on the relationship with and potential of the target. Se-jun stared at the crystal, a thought rising in his mind. However, if I use it on myself, the thing it creates is worse than a common piece of iron ore. Colorless ore, a connection ore extracted from Lee Se-jun. It's completely empty. If only I could have awakened this ability a little sooner. He looked at the faint ore in his hand, his nails digging into his palm, his voice a whisper, as if pleading with the darkness. If there's nothing inside, then just devour the regret that's tearing me apart. Right after that, Lee Se-jun suddenly raised the hammer in his hand, a rumbling sound echoing from afar. He looked up at the churning black sea. Is that sound the roar of the Dead Sea, or the sound of the waves I've always heard? But one thing I'm sure of, whenever this sound rings in my ears, in that moment, Lee Se-jun frantically hammered down on the object. A bold idea sparked in his mind. A masterpiece far beyond imagination would always be born. At the last moment, the hammer struck down. A pillar of light suddenly shot straight into the sky. He raised his hammer high, his voice dropping, full of conviction. Still no special ability, even at the very end? After saying that, Lee Se-jun couldn't help but scoff. And here I thought something good might actually happen. Even if it was my very own nexus stone. Staring at the colorless piece of metal in his hand, he muttered inwardly, "It's still so damn boring. Instead, I'll end this life with my own two hands." Just then, Lee Se-jun's face suddenly tensed, his eyes rolled back, and he burst out laughing. His twisted laughter echoed across the Dead Sea, both insane and tragic. I really am a madman. To think that the only thing I'm doing until the very end is swinging a smithing hammer. In that moment, Lee Se-jun's mind sank into a jumble of thoughts, and when I threw away the last sword, I realized the truth about the sound of waves that had constantly appeared ever since I awakened my magic. All this time, I'd been wondering what that sound meant. It turns out, that was the presence of the Sea of Annihilation. His eyes closed, regret weighing on him like a boulder, his lips moved in remorse. If only I had understood that a little sooner, or if I had convinced those 3 dogs earlier. Lee Se-jun denied it. No. If I had started smithing for others just a little bit sooner, maybe things would have turned out differently. The space around Lee Se-jun suddenly twisted, and a giant image of an ancient armament appeared. An announcement echoed. The spiritual image of the armament has manifested. The skill, Primal Regression Eidolon, is being activated. Amidst a blinding flash of light, a calm, unfamiliar voice called out, "Contestant." In a daze, he snapped his eyes open, his breath coming in ragged gasps, unable to shake a feeling of panic. What? I'm not dead? Across from him, Assistant Han stared blankly. Hey, contestant Lee Se-jun, what the hell do you think you're doing over there? Hearing that, Lee Se-jun shuddered. Contestant? It's been 31 years since I last heard that word. Suddenly, the man yelled, "Why are you just spacing out in the middle of the entrance exam?" As soon as he finished speaking, his eyes widened. What? Lee Se-jun glanced around. The entrance exam? If this is from 31 years ago, then could this be Babel? Are these just memories flashing before my eyes as I die? A look of shock flashed in his eyes as he recalled his final moment. Wait, the Eidolon manifestation phenomenon I saw right before I died. The air around Lee Se-jun seemed to freeze, his breathing heavy. A regression to the starting point? Did that really happen because of the weapon I made from my nexus stone? Assistant Han's voice turned stern. This is your final warning. Contestant Lee Se-jun, he continued. If you don't get serious right now, I'm kicking you out of here. Hearing this, he nodded instinctively. Yes. Lee Se-jun stared at the hammer below. Regression. So that's what it was. His hand tightened in midair, as if gripping an invisible hammer handle. If I had realized the abilities I was given sooner and started smithing earlier, could I have changed how everything turned out? Lee Se-jun frantically denied it. No, that's not what's most important. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat stabilized, and his whole body felt reborn in that moment of clarity. He stared at the palm of his hand. There's only one thing that truly matters now. Something I absolutely have to do. At that thought, the corners of Lee Se-jun's mouth curled up, and he stood tall in the middle of the room. His eyes burned like a forge igniting its first flame, his voice low but resounding in his mind. I have to protect everything. Lee Se-jun's lips curled into a smirk once more as he thought. In this life, I will pass the Babel exam. He gently swung the hammer high, his eyes lighting up as the thought crossed his mind. Meeting those 3 dogs is just the beginning. Then, a small flame suddenly erupted, making Kim Enon flinch slightly. He leaned toward the forge, his eyes glinting with surprise. All he could see was Lee Se-jun, frantically hammering the piece of metal. Kim Enon immediately moved closer, his gaze fixed on his hands. It was incredible. It looked slow, but the rhythm was perfect, with a clear and pure resonance. He carefully watched the piece of metal in Se-jun's hands, thinking with admiration, this is truly high-level smithing. In that moment, Kim In-on stood frozen, his eyes still glued to him. He swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the iron ingot that was gradually taking shape. Just what level of perfection is that? At the same time, Assistant Han's eyes widened in astonishment. Did he really make that? Seeing this, Kim In-on smirked. A genius contestant has applied. If he just submitted his work as is, he would have passed instantly. Just then, Se-jun slammed the hammer down on the piece of metal. A loud noise rang out, drawing everyone's attention. Then, the piece of metal suddenly shattered into fragments. Assistant Han was practically rooted to the spot. Over here, Kim In-on was so shocked his eyes were wide open. At his station, Se-jun stared blankly at the burning object in his hand. Se-jun turned the small piece of metal in his hand. Not too bad. But is this all the bigger it gets? He pressed his lips together, analyzing the situation. Nexus extraction quantifies the relationship with a specific target to extract non-existent ores. Se-jun stared at the metal again, his expression darkening. The problem is, my nexus level is still too low, making it difficult to utilize right now. Looking at the status window in front of him, he gave a bitter laugh. Besides, compared to the other Babel freshmen, my stats are pathetic. Se-jun looked up and sighed helplessly. It's a shame, but if this is the price for returning to the past, it's still a bargain, he muttered to himself, forcing himself to calm down. That's right, don't rush. A murderous glint flashed in Se-jun's eyes as he thought about the future. Wanting more than this is just greed. There's still plenty of time to crush those bastards from the demon world. The monsters from the demon world threaten not just humanity, but the entire planet. The 6 great demon gods causing humanity's extinction was all part of their plan. Se-jun stared into space, thinking to himself, if I want to stop them, I can't be picky about the means or methods. I can't let myself get flustered by the major events in the future. That's why I need to get a weapon or skill related to runes first. He nodded slightly, as if confirming it with himself. The first step of the plan, enrolling in Babel, is taken care of. Next up is... Just then, a flash of light drew Se-jun's attention. His eyes shot wide open in clear astonishment. The system's voice rang out majestically. User Se-jun's nexus level has reached level 1. The skill, Nexus Imprint, has been added. 1 week later, at Babel Academy. Babel Academy appeared in the early morning sun. Meanwhile, in a hallway inside the academy, Se-jun let out an irritated sigh. Damn it, I'm lost again. Is this even the right place? He looked around the vast hallway, his eyes stopping on a familiar sign. This is it. As soon as he stepped inside, Se-jun spoke cautiously. Good morning. Someone's voice cut in, addressing student Se-jun. After a moment of confusion, his expression shifted to one of shock. Michael Baumut slowly tapped on the table. He said mockingly, You look rather relaxed. Michael raised an eyebrow, glancing towards the crowded waiting room. Can't you see that everyone is waiting? Michael Baumut, Vice Dean of the BIPA department. Hearing this, Kim In-on couldn't help but speak up. Vice Dean, there are still 10 minutes until the supplementary exam begins. The man immediately cut him off. This isn't about time, it's about attitude. Michael's voice deepened. I'll have to give him a warning for this. On the side, Se-jun felt a bit awkward, sighing inwardly. Not only is the refining department in terrible shape, but he's also at odds with his superiors? Se-jun's gaze shifted to Kim In-on. Now I understand why he recommended another student. As he continued to look around, Han turned to him with unconcealed anger. His eyes locked onto Se-jun, scanning him from head to toe. Seeing this, he froze for a moment, his arm unconsciously going limp. After a brief hesitation, Se-jun slowly began to speak. Nice to meet you. Faced with Han Baumut's disdainful attitude, he forced a strained smile. This naive little brat, what's his deal? It's been a long time since I've been treated like this. How annoying, truly unbelievable. Just then, a voice rang out, capturing everyone's attention. Has everyone gathered? Immediately after, a figure appeared in the bright sunlight. Seeing this, Se-jun and Han both turned around at the same time. Over here? Michael let out a breath. We were just wondering when you would arrive, Dean. At the same time, his eyes widened the moment he saw the other person. Who is that person? Ryu-ha immediately sat down, making eye contact with Se-jun. She stared at him with an icy gaze and spoke in a low voice. I apologize for being late. Ryu-ha, the department dean at Babel. Upon seeing her, Se-jun couldn't help but feel a bit bewildered. Why is she here? The moment he saw Ryu-ha, Se-jun fell silent, his gaze darkening as if tracing a distant memory. I'd heard rumors that she used to work at Babel. Thinking about this, his inner turmoil grew. I can't believe that person is now sitting in the dean's chair. S-rank hero, the weapon eater Ryu-ha, a superhuman with the unique ability to increase her power by consuming various weapons. Before I regressed in time, she was just a regular customer who frequently visited my shop. A long time after that, Ryu-ha showed up, looking disheveled. Her voice softened, her eyes curved as if smiling, but deep down, they hid an unreadable guilt. I truly regret having eaten your weapon. Meanwhile, Se-jun stood frozen in place. He didn't respond to Ryu-ha. Then, silence filled the room. She looked down at the floor. Over here, Se-jun wore a furious expression, clenching his teeth so hard his body trembled. In the end, all he could do was bow his head helplessly. Back in the present, a voice called out, short but firm, pulling him from his train of thought. Se-jun. Se-jun snapped out of it and quickly replied, "Yes, sir." Kim In-on spoke in a steady voice, his eyes sweeping over each candidate. "I will now begin explaining the contents of the test. Everyone, pay attention." He emphasized each word, his voice clear. "You will have a total of 90 minutes to complete this test." Kim In-on paused for a moment before continuing. "During that 90-minute period, your task is to forge a piece of equipment that can be compatible with the sword from the previous test." Kim In-on paused for a few seconds, creating a heavy silence. However, his voice became colder, each word ringing out clearly like a command. "You are only permitted to use the alchemy forging technique to craft it." Kim In-on tilted his head slightly toward the rack of gleaming ores. "As for the materials," he lowered his voice, "you have the freedom to choose any type of ore available here." Kim In-on's voice dropped, his gaze sweeping over the two judges with respect. "The final product will be personally evaluated by Dean Ryu-ha and Vice Dean Baumut. So pour your heart and soul into creating something you can be most proud of." Immediately after, he brought his hand down decisively, his voice ringing out like the opening bell. "All right." Standing before Se-jun and Han, Kim In-on shouted, "The test officially begins." After a while, he muttered under his breath, "Only alchemy forging?" Se-jun pressed his lips together for a moment, his eyes fixed on the pile of materials. "I need to create a resonance using pure magic to prevent the elemental energy from running wild." Seeing this, Han let out a faint laugh. "You think staring at that pile of ore is going to make your mana increase on its own?" He slowly lifted his head, his gaze turning colder. "Did I hear that right?" Se-jun asked curiously. "Were you just aiming that insult at me?" The other man smirked again. "Who else is here besides us?" Just then, Kim In-on's voice rang out coldly. "Han Baumut," he reminded him in a loud voice. "Please refrain from making statements unrelated to the exam." Hearing that, he bowed his head slightly. "I'll be more careful." Se-jun was momentarily stunned. "Han Baumut? What the hell? This guy is the judge's son?" "Michael Baumut, Han Baumut." At this thought, he gave a wicked smile. No wonder the two of them look so much alike. Se-jun turned to look at him with a resentful expression. "The more I think about it, the more ridiculous this situation becomes." Seeing this, Han thought to himself, "It seems like that guy has figured it out. That I am the precious son of the vice dean." He smirked contemptuously. "He's just a commoner from a low-class family with the weakest mana among all the candidates. And I, born into the illustrious Baumut family, famed for alchemy forging, possess magical power comparable to the top student of the second year." The outcome of this confrontation was decided from the very beginning. Over here, Ryu-ha's gaze followed their every move. She smiled faintly. Lapis lazuli and aquamarine. Both of these are materials that contain an enormous amount of mana. Furthermore, they are elemental ores that carry water-type spiritual energy. Hearing this, Kim In-on continued in a low tone. "Water-type mana is inherently weak against fire, making them extremely difficult to forge." Michael Baumut smirked. "That's ancient history. Modern alchemy forging techniques have advanced far beyond the past." Faced with his arrogant expression, Kim In-on interjected. "It's true that the alchemy forging method isn't restricted by space or circumstance, but the crafting time varies depending on the user and the type of ore. So under today's conditions, it will only take 30 minutes. Meanwhile, Michael continued to smile, a grin so sinister it was chilling. He lowered his voice. "Han can synthesize any type of ore. Just a few days ago, it took Han 30 minutes to spin the crystal with his spiritual energy." Kim In-on couldn't help but feel a bit dazed. Completing resonance synthesis in just 30 minutes? A sudden shiver ran down his spine. What the hell? If his skill level was high enough to complete resonance synthesis in 30 minutes, he was far beyond the second years, let alone the freshmen. Kim In-on's gaze shifted over to him, suspicion beginning to form. "I see. They set a tight time limit for forging the magic stone, provided an abundance of raw materials, and then imposed the alchemical forging method. They deliberately chose an exam topic that gave Han Baumut, who already excelled at alchemical forging, an absolute advantage." Kim In-on's eyes locked onto his face. Michael was as cunning as a venomous snake. After a moment of silence, Se-jun let out a soft breath. "This should be fine." Eun-ha looked at him curiously, unable to hide her surprise. What caught their attention was the way everyone's eyes were glued to him. Hydratite and red flame stone? Michael frowned slightly, sensing the unstable fluctuations from the two minerals. They were fire-based versions of lapis lazuli and Hainan jade, with ridiculously high concentrations of magic. He commented coldly, "I don't know about his skills, but his ego is certainly massive." Over on his side, Han instinctively glanced toward Se-jun. He narrowed his eyes at Se-jun's pile of materials. Did that guy deliberately choose ores that were the complete opposite of his? At that thought, Han let out a small smirk. What a fool. With that pathetic amount of mana you have, don't even dream of controlling the red flame stone. He smiled faintly, his gaze lowering. This is turning out to be even easier than I thought. Suddenly, Han's expression changed, and he looked back at Se-jun. The system announced, "The contract engraving skill has been activated." The system's voice rang out dryly. Magical light enveloped his body. Contract engraving. Harmony is now active. Contract engraving allows the user to attach contract stones to use existing equipment slots. Left hand, right hand. He equipped the iron flame silver onto his right arm, and immediately after, a flame slowly descended. After a moment of silence, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly, even though I myself still have a long way to go. But to show off a piece of trash like this. He stopped his hammer in midair, his eyes turning cold. Is something that, as a blacksmith, I can never accept. Seeing this, Assistant Han screamed frantically, "Did you just destroy a weapon in front of the professor? Do you think blacksmithing is some kind of joke?" Se-jun calmly called out, "Examiner." Before Kim In-on's bewildered eyes, he coolly made a request, "I'd like to retake the test." At this, the assistant screamed again, "Hey, you contestant." The professor suddenly cut Assistant Han off. Kim In-on crossed his arms, giving a short but firm order, "Bring him the remaining materials." Assistant Han was stunned, stammering, "What?" The professor raised an eyebrow, shooting him a sharp look. "He hasn't actually violated any rules, has he? Or would you prefer I go get them myself?" Not daring to argue, Assistant Han quickly replied, "I'll bring the materials right away." Kim In-on approached the forge and looked Se-jun straight in the eye, his voice low but filled with pressure. "Young man," he reminded him sternly, "are you aware that there are only 40 minutes left in the exam?" He simply nodded. "Yes." Kim In-on stared at the broken pieces. He asked curiously, "So you think smashing it was the right decision?" Hearing this, Se-jun's eyes quickly darted towards the destroyed metal fragments. Finally, he turned to Kim In-on, his gaze unwavering. "I couldn't possibly submit something like that." Over here, the professor tilted his head slightly, a thoughtful look in his eyes, before speaking slowly. "All right then, do your best." A moment later, the fire of determination once again lit up in Se-jun's eyes. He took a deep breath, feeling the youthfulness but also the weakness of this body, and thought with a sense of urgency. With this body, achieving a perfect forging is truly difficult. Thinking this, Se-jun frowned slightly. Mana, strength, and time were all running out. So, what was the best choice in this situation? Suddenly, a loud sizzling sound erupted from the forge. A few contestants jerked their heads around. What was that sound? One person shouted in a panic. "Is that bastard pumping mana into the firestones?" Someone lunged forward, yelling, "Hey, what do you think you're doing? If those stones ignite, they'll explode. Hurry up." Meanwhile, Se-jun calmly raised his hand to activate the flames. The entire room fell silent, as a 5-colored flame erupted violently without exploding. Someone gasped, "Huh? No way, that madman?" Just then, an invisible torrent of mana slammed directly into him. At the terrifying sight, a few people yelled in panic, "Fire! Bring a fire extinguisher, quick!" Assistant Han's voice trembled as he pleaded, "Professor, please make him stop." Kim In-on replied nonchalantly, "Just let him be. Not only the contestants, but even you shouldn't be reacting like this." At this, he gestured seriously. Observe the flow of the flames carefully. He couldn't help but feel a little baffled. This is strange. Right in front of Se-jun was the 5-colored hellfire, a high-temperature flame amplified by the resonance of 5 types of firestones. He smirked, his eyes never leaving the flame. It requires extremely precise mana control, but it's an excellent technique that can even be used with minimal mana. A contestant stammered, not believing his eyes. "What? It's not exploding?" Another one hesitated. "Wait, could that be?" Someone else pointed at the iron ingot in the furnace, shouting in amazement. The color of the iron ingot has changed. Witnessing this, Kim In-on quickly understood. So, that's it. He resonated the firestones to increase the flame's power and alter the properties of the iron ingot. He looked at Se-jun with a concerned expression. This would significantly shorten the time needed for forging. However, with only 30 minutes remaining, time was still incredibly tight. Thinking this, Kim In-on concluded silently. His forging rhythm earlier was excellent, but if that's all he has, he won't finish in time. Sharp metal shards shot into the air. Seeing this, he smirked, a rare glint in his eyes. Immediately after, Se-jun gripped the object with his bare hands and slowly placed it inside the forge. Se-jun could be seen exhaling with difficulty. A moment later, he resumed hammering down on the piece of metal. Suddenly, Se-jun's arm froze in midair. He gritted his teeth, feeling his mana completely drain away, and muttered, "Damn it, I'm out of mana and my protective barrier just shattered. Damn this weak body, I need to start training as soon as this exam is over." Despite his thoughts, blood had started to seep from Se-jun's palm, slowly spreading across it. In that moment, he had only one thought: I can't waste a single second. Immediately after, Se-jun once again began to hammer down furiously. He secretly made the decision to push his body to its limits. Just then, Kim In-on's voice rang out. 10 more minutes. 3 minutes. In the final minute, he let out a guttural roar that shook the entire space. 1 minute. As soon as the word left his lips, Se-jun immediately raised the sword in his hand. Kim In-on shouted once more, "Stop!" Hearing that, he slightly opened his mouth and exhaled. At that moment, Se-jun clenched his hand under the table, fresh blood dripping steadily from it. At the same time, the system's bright screen flashed. Complete. 5-colored flame sword has been completed. You have acquired the C-rank skill, Flame Artificer. The notifications continued to ring out in midair. The level judgment result of the 5-colored flame sword is high. Quality grade: high, upper mid. A curved sword was depicted with 5 flames etched onto it. The flames compressed within the blade react to magical power, creating brilliant colors. This item reveals the potential of the blacksmith who created it. The color and properties of the sword may change slightly, depending on the nature of the magic infused into it. Someone repeated in a trembling voice, "The weapon's grade is high." Se-jun added, "I'd like you to check the detailed description in the information window." It was clear to everyone that this was a passing result. Assistant Han burst out excitedly, his voice nearly a shout amidst the jubilant atmosphere. "He passed!" Kim In-on waved his hand dismissively. "Quiet down, you brat." He immediately lowered his voice. "My apologies." The scene shifts to a room, Professor Kim In-on's office. Inside, he glanced worriedly behind him. Se-jun sat upright in front of the desk. He asked with an unwavering gaze, "Is this sword worthy of submission?" Kim In-on was silent for a moment before replying, "For now, yes." He exhaled. "You still don't seem satisfied." Se-jun, I'll be blunt." Kim In-on's voice was deep and heavy, as if carrying the weight of an era. "This place won't be able to meet your standards." He emphasized each word with force. "You'd be better off withdrawing your application." Kim In-on continued in a low tone. "Babel's reputation may be overwhelming. However, the metallurgy department hasn't produced any outstanding achievements for a while now." On the other side, Se-jun remained silent. He narrowed his eyes slightly at the professor. "That's a truth I already know all too well. Babel's metallurgy department will close in the next 8 years due to declining standards. In the future, Bunsen Academy will become the world's best blacksmith training academy." After a moment's hesitation, Kim In-on hesitantly made a suggestion. "Perhaps in the future, Bunsen will be the best place." Hearing this, Se-jun immediately cut in. "You're wrong, Professor. The best place won't be Bunsen." He pointed directly at himself with a confident gaze. "It will be Babel, the place I'm about to enroll in." In that moment, Se-jun declared loudly, "Professor, you are mistaken." He looked straight at Kim In-on without a hint of wavering. "The best place won't be Bunsen, but Babel, where I'm about to enroll." Hearing this, the professor was visibly startled, his eyes wavering. Kim In-on stared at Se-jun with a clear mix of doubt and astonishment. Kim In-on narrowed his eyes, his sharp gaze scrutinizing him, his voice slow and challenging. "In that case, you'll need to become the top student of the department first. Are you confident you can do that?" He replied, without a shred of hesitation. "Of course. At least at the student level, there will be no one better than me." As soon as the words were spoken, In-on's expression changed. He asked in a serious tone, "Do you know the process for selecting the top new student of the department at Babel?" In response to the question, Se-jun rattled off the information like a machine. They select a candidate for the department's top student through a supplementary exam between the 2 top students of the department. And from those candidates, the one who will become the top student is determined. That's what I know. Babel Academy broadly divides its students into 3 faculties: the Agaquif Combat Faculty, the Support Faculty, and the Bosapa Technology Faculty. Within each faculty, dozens of majors are intertwined like roots. And becoming the top student of a department means you have received the highest evaluation among those countless majors and are recognized by all of Babel as a top-tier talent. Back in the present, Kim In-on's tension was palpable. His arms were clenched so tightly they were trembling. Kim In-on turned to look directly at Se-jun, his voice dropping with sincerity. I'll say it again, not as a professor, but as a senior blacksmith. He continued in a weary tone. Even if you become the top student of the department, it's hard to expect success as a blacksmith here. Go to Bunsen Academy. Kim In-on gave a slight nod, as if he'd already made the decision for him. That is the path for you. Se-jun looked at the man before him with rare respect, thinking to himself, putting a junior's future above his own position. He truly is a decent man. After a brief silence, he reaffirmed, the environment doesn't matter, as I just said. His eyes lit up, his enthusiastic voice echoing, Babel, the place I'm about to enroll in, will soon become the best. Kim In-on looked bewildered. A place where he will make it the best? Finally, the corners of his mouth turned up, revealing his interest. Kim In-on couldn't help but chuckle as he extended a hand towards Se-jun. That's a statement that goes far beyond arrogance, but for some reason, I don't hate it. He held out his hand, his gaze sincere. I look forward to working with you. Seeing this, Se-jun didn't hesitate to grasp Kim In-on's hand. He gripped it firmly, a smirk playing on his lips. Likewise, sparkling letters immediately appeared in front of him. A link with the target, Kim In-on, has been established. The creator's link with Se-jun is currently at level 1, extracting a link from the target, Kim In-on. Se-jun was seen clenching his wrist, an object hovering right in the center of his palm. A block of metal appeared, with a fire smoldering inside. The system described it, flame-bearing iron link, quality grade, high, lower mid. A type of metal that possesses flame. It has wood-like properties and can store fire within it. Se-jun's arm was engulfed in flames. Witnessing this sight, the man gritted his teeth. That guy, what kind of useless little trick is he trying to pull? Meanwhile, he was still focused on activating the metal blocks. At that moment, the iron ores began to rotate around each other. Seeing this, Se-jun smirked, a blazing fire glinting in his eyes. At the same time, the other group was still staring intently at him. Over here, Michael Baumet raised an eyebrow slightly. Is he trying to create a resonance by using the same type of attribute as the mineral? How foolish. The fundamental principle is to use pure mana, to make the elemental minerals resonate with each other. He silently made his judgment. If he keeps forcing it like that, the magical elements will inevitably explode out of control. At that thought, Michael Baumet sneered. Idiot. He's definitely about to cause an accident. Then suddenly, Se-jun swung his hand forward. A layer of scales was seen covering his arm, and the entire room fell silent. Se-jun remained perfectly still. Witnessing this, Kim In-on and Eun-ha quickly bowed their heads. Meanwhile, Michael's eyes widened. What is this incredible firepower? In that moment, a sword materialized, and the instant he saw it, Se-jun's lips moved slightly. The system's voice immediately echoed in his ear. Iron Fire Silver has been unequipped. Equipment processing has been completed. Congratulations, you have successfully crafted the fire accumulation sheath. At this astonishing sight, Eun-ha's eyes widened in amazement. While Michael Baumet was so shocked, his entire body froze, a sense of confusion washing over him. No way. Did he actually succeed? The system screen immediately flashed to life, displaying the equipment, Fire Accumulation Sheath. Fire Accumulation Sheath. Rank, Rare. Quality, Low. A sword sheath imbued with a high concentration of fire-type mana. It can store and amplify fire attribute spiritual power, allowing the use of the special skill, Conflagration. At the same time, cold sweat trickled down Han's temple. He already finished the synthesis process? What was with that speed? He stared blankly at his palm, his mind screaming in turmoil. This is completely absurd. The magical elements should have exploded. As he thought this, Han's confusion grew. Did I misunderstand something? Just then, Michael Baumet flinched. He quickly shouted, Wait! Stop what you're doing. If you dare to channel elemental spiritual power into those magic stones. Han's sphere began to vibrate violently in his hand, his vision suddenly obscured by the intense heat. In the next instant, the sphere unexpectedly detonated, sending shards flying everywhere. A loud explosion rang out, shaking the entire space. That afternoon, in the examination hall of the refining department, the scene shifted to a room where crystal fragments were scattered across the floor. Over here, Han appeared with a scratched face. After a moment of silence, Kim In-on began to speak hesitantly. Normally, after a thorough evaluation process, he paused for a moment, clenching his jaw as if trying to swallow his unconcealable frustration. One of the two would be nominated for the top position in the department. At this, Kim In-on raised his head and looked directly at Han. However, what happened was truly regrettable. In that moment, Han flinched, clutching his bleeding arm tightly. His gaze lingered on Han before continuing. I never imagined the exam would end with one side having to forfeit. At the same time, Michael bit his lip. Despite his frustration, he managed to keep his voice calm. Since a student was injured during the exam, the best course of action now is to nullify the results and schedule a retake. Hearing this, Kim In-on whipped around. He objected sternly. We have no right to invalidate the results of an exam that has already been conducted. After all, wasn't the accident caused by student Han's own carelessness? He tilted his head, his gaze as sharp as a knife, as it swept toward Kim In-on, his voice bone-chillingly cold. Professor Kim, it seems you care more about scores than the well-being of your student, don't you? After saying his piece, he fell silent, his eyes flashing with anger. Just then, Michael Baumut stood up and calmly continued. Let's not talk about that for now. Michael walked slowly to the center of the hall, his eyes boring into Lee Se-jun as if trying to uncover all his secrets. The fastest resonance speed ever recorded in the academic world is 5 minutes. But at this point, his voice suddenly rose to nearly a shout. A new student, who just barely set foot in this school, was able to channel mana and achieve instantaneous resonance. Do any of you find that even remotely plausible? The original nature of the alchemical forging method is a technique created to craft weapons using only mana in situations where traditional forging is impossible. Therefore, the core of alchemical forging isn't the traditional method of dominating ore with the blacksmith's own life force, but rather, it is about returning to the source of the mineral's core and awakening the latent vitality within it. That is the true essence of alchemical forging. In that moment, Lee Se-jun had only one thought. What I just did is proof of exactly that. And this is the answer the world of blacksmiths will soon discover after countless trials and errors. It's a simple method that will become the standard in a few years. So there's no reason for me to hide it. But I don't have the time to teach a stubborn old fool who just shouts without listening. Finally, he spoke coldly. I have no idea what the hell you're rambling on about. Hearing this, a corner of Michael Baumut's mouth curled up. Just as I suspected. You cheated. He let out a dry, bitterly contemptuous laugh. A rookie with no background managed to forge a rare-grade item? If you were going to cheat, you should have at least made it a little more believable. Se-jun frowned, his eyes darkening at the insult, but he kept his voice controlled. What are you talking about? Just then, a voice cut through the tense conversation. That's right, this is truly absurd. Michael Baumut bowed his head deeply, but the corners of his lips twisted into a calculating smirk. I knew it. I was certain you would understand the problem. Madam Principal, it's just as you say. This is utterly ridiculous. We need to disqualify Lee Se-jun for his fraudulent behavior and hold a retake. Meanwhile, she simply walked right past him. Eun-ha stopped in front of his sword. Kim In-on watched her, bewildered. The principal. At that moment, Eun-ha carefully took hold of the sword, a whisper escaping her lips. Unbelievable. Drool was seen trickling from Eun-ha's mouth, and then she suddenly pointed at Lee Se-jun. Student Lee Se-jun. Eun-ha suddenly made a suggestion, her eyes sparkling like a child who had just discovered a treasure. Can I take a bite? No, just a lick. Can I please taste it just once? At her words, Michael Baumut was practically speechless, his eyes filled with bewilderment, while Kim In-on just stared at her, dumbfounded. Taste it? Suddenly, a gurgling sound echoed from within Eun-ha's stomach. Hearing it, the entire group practically froze. Later that afternoon, in the city's central district, Lee Se-jun was leisurely leaving the academy. He stood under the brilliant red sunset, a thought crossing his mind. As I thought, the final refinement stage is still a bit crude. The level of completion hasn't reached its final stage yet. Thinking this, Lee Se-jun tried to reassure himself. Despite that, he let out a small laugh, his hair rustling in the evening breeze, an unconcealable look of glee on his face. Seeing that old Vice Principal Baumut trembling with rage, it was totally worth it. A passerby looked at Lee Se-jun with a wary expression, whispering to their friend, his laugh is so creepy. The friend quickly urged them on. That guy's weird. Don't make eye contact. Just ignore him and keep walking. Back with Lee Se-jun, he suddenly stopped short. Wait a minute. Now that I think about it, Baumut. That name sounds really familiar, but I can't remember where I've heard it. Then, Lee Se-jun frantically slapped his forehead while muttering nonstop, Bahamut, Bahamut, Bahamut. The images from his past life suddenly resurfaced. Louis whispered in a furious tone. Back when I was at Babel, the cheap weapons I bought after doing all that back-breaking manual labor on that bastard's orders suddenly exploded. Then he suddenly screamed, his voice filled with resentment. That's why I got this mana burn and ended up in this miserable state. Damn it, if it wasn't for that guy. On the other side, Lee Se-jun just stared at Louis Valen with a cold gaze. Back in the present, his footsteps halted as a horrifying thought flashed through Lee Se-jun's mind. The name of the blacksmith who caused Mad Dog Louis Valen's permanent injury was Bahamut. Could it be that Han Baumut is that same person? As he thought this, he frowned slightly. My primary goal in this life is to quickly approach and win over the 3 dogs. But for the Mad Dog, that might not be necessary anymore. Then, Lee Se-jun's lips curled into a cold smile, his eyes turning sinister as an idea sparked in his mind. Because as long as I stop Han Baomut from running rampant, Mad Dog Louis will never go down the wrong path. In a flash, the scene changed to the refining department's meeting room, from which an angry shout could be heard. Are you planning to make student Lee Se-jun the top student of our department? A representative spoke up, his voice slow but laced with suspicion. Professors from other departments spoke up. Are you serious about this decision? The person next to him hesitated slightly. Even if you intend to do so, this is a bit much. Eun-ha slowly placed both hands on the table, her calm gaze sweeping over every face, her voice low but resonant. Does anyone here have any objections? An elderly professor shook his head slightly, his eyes showing a bit of reservation, his voice tinged with compromise. Not exactly. Rather than an objection, Michael suddenly cut in. This is more like sincere advice, he continued casually. After all, headmaster, you've only recently been appointed. Hearing this, Eun-ha's expression changed, her anger now unconcealed. Another person added, That's right. We admit his equipment was impressive, but perhaps we need to reconsider this more thoroughly. Kim In-on immediately interjected. You professors are only saying that because you haven't seen Lee Se-jun's Tichoa scabbard with your own eyes. The craftsmanship might be a bit crude, but if you look at how the mana operates and its compatibility with the 5-colored flame sword, one of them couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. It truly is astonishing. But to be honest, I'm still uncertain about its practicality. At the same time, she spoke up again. This weapon has probably only reached less than 60% of the completion level Lee Se-jun was aiming for, and it's that very incompleteness that shows its immense potential. She made sure to emphasize every single word. The atmosphere in the room froze, as Eun-ha slowly continued, each word landing like a hammer blow. If, after witnessing the upcoming demonstration by top student Lee Se-jun, you still cannot accept my decision. Right after, she declared loud and clear, I will immediately resign from my position as headmaster. In the middle of the enormous plaza, Louis's voice echoed from the sound-amplifying magic, ringing out as solemnly as an ancient oath. 54 years ago, the celestial realm bestowed the Tower of Heroes upon us for the evolution of mankind. The atmosphere suddenly grew somber as an illusion recreated the image of the sky cracking open. His voice became heavier. In response, hell unleashed the swamp of chaos, which rots all life. While we found new opportunities to pursue, a massive disaster struck at the same time. Standing in the center of the grand hall, Louis lectured earnestly, his tone incredibly eloquent. Babel was also formed during that very turbulent period. This is the largest academy in history, built right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. To this day, Babel has trained countless outstanding heroes. At this point, he ceremoniously announced a name. A prime example is the Ascended Emperor, Sir Louis Valenne, and you too will become one of them. Louis's voice gradually became more earnest. March forward. For all who have set foot in this Babel Academy, his voice suddenly soared, as solemn and sacred as an oath on a battlefield. That is the noble mission of a hero. The one who had just spoken was none other than the Ascended Emperor, Louis Valenne. Lee Se-jun stood silently in the crowd, quietly observing Louis Valenne on the stage, his mind filled with calculations. Seeing him in person like this, he seems like a very kind person, though in reality, he's not exactly a gentle, innocent old man. The MC stepped forward, raising the microphone. Next, we will have the demonstration by the top students from this year's entrance examination. Will the top students of each department please come up to the stage? Answering the call, a group of male and female students walked onto the stage one by one. Lee Se-jun watched the proud figures advance, his eyes darkening as memories of his past life flashed by. The top student of a department? In my past life, I used to wonder why so many people were so arrogant just because they had good grades at the academy. Right at this moment, the MC shouted, Well then, right now, we will begin the skill demonstration. He glanced around, a forced smile playing on his lips. Witnessing this scene, I think I understand the issue now. At the same time, the MC raised his voice. The model being used for today's demonstration is none other than this masterpiece. Ladies and gentlemen, as soon as the words were spoken, automaton model number 9 appeared. The moment he saw it, he excitedly introduced it. A golem from the Roy workshop, automaton model number 9. It even possesses combat capabilities equivalent to a C-rank hero. Lee Se-jun's eyes were glued to automaton model number 9, and he chuckled with interest. A combat-specialized automaton, huh? Since it's not equipped with any specific weapons, I guess it'll use martial arts? The MC gestured towards the arena entrance. The first to start us off is the representative from the combat department. His voice boomed dramatically. The demonstration will be performed by the top student of Agaquif, Mr. J. Myers, the top student of Agaquif, Jack Myers. Immediately after, J. and automaton model number 9 appeared on the stage. Lee Se-jun squinted, observing the dark-haired teenager who walked out. If it's J, I believe he's the third son of the Myers clan. Rumor has it he's an eccentric for pursuing martial arts. Despite being born into a family renowned for its swordsmanship, it seems those rumors are true. Just then, the MC yelled, "Well then, we will begin the match right now." On the other side, the automaton's eyes began to glow. That was also the moment he gave the signal. As soon as the words were spoken, it dug its foot into the ground and spun sharply. The automaton charged straight at Jack Myers. It immediately threw a punch. Jack instantly twisted his body to dodge. Meanwhile, the automaton furiously swung its fists toward him. A moment later, Jack leaped down below, the tips of his toes scraping against the ground. He lifted his head to look at it. Now it's my turn to shine. With that, Jack Myers didn't hesitate to rush straight for the automaton. He clenched his fist and immediately punched right through its body. Witnessing the scene, the crowd of students was practically speechless. Over here, Jack was still relentlessly attacking the automaton. Se-jun's eyes widened as he witnessed that terrifying burst of speed. What's going on? I clearly remember he died early on as an A rank in his mid-20s. Thinking this, he couldn't help but feel a bit bewildered. With this level of skill, he should be a once-in-a-decade genius at Babel. Se-jun whispered to himself in doubt. Why did he only stop at A rank in his past life? Back to Jack, he smirked coldly. Is this all you've got? At the last second, he swung his arm, ending the battle with the automaton. Its head flew into the air before falling to the ground. Jack retracted his fist, standing tall amidst the slowly settling dust. He let out a soft breath. It's been a while since I've been able to move this freely. The announcer's voice trembled slightly. That was incredible. Then he practically screamed with excitement. That was an absolutely spectacular and amazing performance. Student Jack, he took down an automaton with the power of a C-rank hero in a single breath. The announcer turned back to Jack Myers, unable to hold back his admiration. The top student from Agartha is on a whole different level. On the side, Se-jun frowned slightly. He thought to himself, he really made a huge splash right from the start. The next person is definitely going to be under a lot of pressure. The announcer's voice rang out again. This time, it carried a completely different tone, calmer and more solemn. Next up, we invite the top student of the UR support department. The performance will be by student Erika Ino. He raised an eyebrow slightly as he watched the long, black-haired girl step out. So she's the top student from UR. Pressure? That's not something to worry about at all. Erika, the eldest daughter of the Ino family, one of the three most illustrious clans in Japan. She wasn't a top-tier conqueror, but had built a reputation as an S-rank hero with a mythic-grade weapon. However, in the end, she was corrupted into a demon and was eliminated by her own family. At this moment, Se-jun made a decision in his mind. Since she'll be corrupted into a demon in the future, forming a connection with her won't do me any good. Then, Erika suddenly turned and looked toward him. Seeing this, Se-jun froze for a moment, staring at her with a dazed look. He blankly followed Erika's steps, his mind a tangled mess. What was that? Did she just look at me? At the same time, the announcer declared in a serious voice, "The automaton being used for this performance is model number 9, equipped with armor. Its defensive capabilities are 1.5 times greater than the previous version." He shouted excitedly, his voice shaking the entire arena. "Let's see what surprise student Ino has in store for us." Then, Erika suddenly took out a crow. Her eyes suddenly lit up with a demonic glint as she softly muttered a command. "Go!" As soon as the words left her mouth, the crow shot straight out. It flew up into the air, circling the automaton. Faced with this unexpected sight, Se-jun was a bit confused. A crow? At the same time, the automaton looked up at it, its eyes flashing with an eerie red light. Over here, he carefully observed the automaton. He internally assessed that the automaton had switched to a full defensive stance. It'll be very difficult to break through such a solid defense, especially since it's a defense-specialized model. Back to Erika, her lips moved slightly. Suddenly, the crow spread its wings, its legs extending to reveal sharp talons. One of the crow's eyes also flashed with a blue light. Under the sun, it spread its wings, and then suddenly, the crow accelerated, diving straight for the automaton. Down below, the entire area erupted into chaos, with dust and dirt flying everywhere. Witnessing this, Se-jun was nearly stunned. On the other side, cracks had appeared on the automaton's body, with electricity arcing out. When did a hole appear in its body? Immediately, the automaton's body collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Erika beckoned with her hand, and the crow flew back to her. The announcer cheered once more. Incredible. Absolutely extraordinary. With just a single blow, the armored automaton has fallen. She pierced right through an opponent with C-rank power. A group of people cheered happily. Erika is amazing. Back with Se-jun, he forced a smile. Well, with the atmosphere this fired up, I feel like I'll get booed if I just show off my weapon and call it a day. Right at that moment, the announcer shouted. And finally, the top student of the Bosipa Technology Department, please welcome student Se-jun. Right then, the announcer enthusiastically introduced him. Continuing our program, we will now begin the performance of the top student from the Bosapa Technology Department, student Lee Se-jun. Elsewhere, performance supervisor number 1, Louis Valen, was watching the battle on a screen. He couldn't help but let out a soft chuckle. The level of this year's new top students is truly impressive. How long has it been since we've seen a top student from the refining department? After saying that, Louis couldn't help but feel a little worried. Will the pressure be too much for that young man? Beside him was performance supervisor number 2, Principal Ryu Ha. She stated firmly, there won't be any problems at all. The stands buzzed as Lee Se-jun stepped into the light, and the announcer smiled knowingly. Will he deliver a performance that surpasses the explosive displays from Jack and Erica just now? Someone couldn't help but exclaim. He's so handsome. The announcer's curiosity was piqued. Is that a rare grade item? That's a rare sight for the refining department. A female student excitedly yelled, Great freshman. At the same time, Lee Se-jun decisively drew the sword from its sheath. He swung it sharply to the side, his eyes locked on his opponent. In that moment, an image of the sword appeared right behind Lee Se-jun, along with its countless functions. A male student spoke up, his eyes a mix of admiration and doubt. That's right, for a freshman to create a rare grade item is incredible. The person next to him hesitated, but, compared to the other departments, it seems to be lacking that wow factor. Murmurs spread as a few students showed their disappointment. For a rare grade item, it looks a bit plain, doesn't it? Well, the previous departments were just too flashy. The male student couldn't help but feel a bit uncertain. I have no idea what he plans to show in this demonstration, either. I really want to know. In a corner of the stands, Michael Baumut smirked, his eyes gleaming with ambition. The heavens are on my side. He stared at Lee Se-jun with a malicious glint in his eye. At this rate, the position of Bosipa's headmaster will surely be mine. In contrast to Michael, Ryu Ha's expression was as calm as a placid lake. Back at the announcer's booth, the MC quickly made an announcement for the demonstration. Model number 10. With power comparable to a D-rank hero, he was suddenly cut off. No! Lee Se-jun looked up, his eyes flashing like a newly drawn blade. His words silenced the entire square. Switch to model number 8. And please, equip it with additional armor. The MC nearly dropped the list in his hands, stammering in shock. Huh? What in the world is he asking for? Model number 8 can sometimes withstand an attack from a B-rank hero, and he wants it to wear extra armor on top of that? He hesitated for a moment. Well, the MC continued hesitantly. It's difficult to prepare that request on such short notice. He thought to himself, is this kid trying to ruin the demonstration? Just then, Kim In-on spoke up. I've already taken care of everything. As he spoke, a metallic entity suddenly appeared. He looked up towards the automaton. This automaton was now fully armored. Seeing this, the MC was stunned. He had it prepared already? He looked around nervously, his tone faltering. If you're that determined. At the same time, Lee Se-jun turned to look at Kim In-on. The man was silent, his gaze fixed on him with anticipation. From the VIP stands, the MC shouted excitedly, Then let's see you go all out. He forced a smile. Now, I have no idea what's going to happen in this match. Immediately after, the MC yelled, Begin. As soon as the bell for the battle rang, Kim In-on tensed up. In that moment, he thought to himself, Go on and raise some hell. Lee Se-jun smirked. All right. He glanced towards the stands where Kim In-on was watching, a hint of a smile in his eyes. I suppose I should live up to his expectations a little, shouldn't I? A fierce spiritual energy began to emanate from the sword in his hand. Lee Se-jun lowered his stance slightly, and the energy swirled into a circle. Witnessing this, the audience roared with excitement. This is insane! At the same time, Michael sneered contemptuously. It's all for show. What can a mana-deficient weakling possibly do? The different flame energies within the 5-colored flame sword naturally conflict with each other. This explosive nature could harm the user if not controlled with an immense amount of mana. However, by utilizing the flame-storing sheath's ability and the technique of drawing the red flame inward, Lee Se-jun now muttered, charging complete. On the other side, the automaton had activated its shield. Meanwhile, he swung his sword powerfully, igniting the flames. The move he just executed sent a shockwave through the entire arena. A thought formed in Lee Se-jun's mind. If I activate the flame energy now, the compressed flame spirits inside will all detonate at once. His eyes were glued to the automaton's protective barrier. In the decisive moment, Lee Se-jun whispered, Detonate. In the stands, Michael Baumut's face went pale, as if he'd realized something was wrong. The MC's jaw dropped in astonishment. What the hell is this madman trying to do? After a long moment, the thick dust began to settle. Lee Se-jun slowly sheathed his sword, breathing out in short, ragged breaths. Job done. Lee Se-jun's gaze followed the slash mark across the field. Did I overdo it a little? Realizing the dire situation, the MC urgently announced, "Technical support team to the central hall, immediately." He hurriedly declared, "With that performance, the competition has concluded." A while later, the sound of high heels echoed throughout the grand hall. Inside, Se-jun wore a puzzled expression. As soon as she saw him, Ryuha gave a slight bow. "My apologies for making you wait after calling you here. I was just helping to clean up the wreckage at the arena." Se-jun scratched his head sheepishly. "Please don't worry about it. I'm the one who should be apologizing. I'm sorry for causing such a scene in the central hall." He lowered his voice slightly. "I should have controlled my power a bit better." She looked at him, baffled. "What are you talking about, student Se-jun?" He was confused. She asked again, "Did you really think I called you here to scold you?" Ryuha immediately denied it. "Of course not. No. The real reason I invited you here is..." Just then, her stomach rumbled again. The strange noise made Se-jun freeze for a second, and he coughed lightly to hide his awkwardness. She finally made her offer. "I'm willing to pay 10 times the market price." Ryuha looked him straight in the eye, her gaze resolute. "Would you be willing to sell me the 5-colored flame sword and its flame-storing sheath?" Hearing this, Se-jun's eyes widened for a moment. What? In that instant, a bond with Ryuha was established. Ryuha suddenly leaned forward, speaking in a cute, wheedling tone. "It really is a wonderful set of equipment." Suddenly, a system screen lit up right in front of Se-jun. A contract with the subject Ryuha has been established. Current contract level with creator Se-jun is level 1. His eyes widened, his pupils trembling in shock. "This fast?" "In my past life, I had to offer her weapons many times before this bond was formed." Se-jun replied awkwardly. "Thank you, ma'am." He reassured himself. "In any case, this is a stroke of good luck." Lines of magical text appeared before his eyes as the system's voice echoed steadily, executing contract extraction. The announcer's voice became more solemn, as if unveiling a rare treasure. "Acquiring contract from target Ryuha, Pact of the Iron Glutton, high rank, masterpiece quality. A type of iron that generates heat by consuming other metals. It will corrode any iron-based material it touches and absorb its core into itself. Absorbs iron to create blood ore." Se-jun stared blankly at the object before him. "So, it's done." Just then, Ryuha leaned in again. "So you're going to sell it to me, right?" He immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am." Hearing this, she raised an eyebrow slightly. "But you just said it was done." Suddenly, a voice came from outside. "Headmaster, it's Kim In-on." He looked up, his voice clear and formal, as if relaying an urgent command. "The Academy president has announced that the awards ceremony will begin now." Kim In-on turned to Se-jun. "May I take student Se-jun with me?" She nodded slightly, her gaze as deep and still as a moonless lake at night. "I understand." Se-jun quickly turned to leave. He sneakily looked back. "Well then, see you later." Meanwhile, Ryuha's stomach continued to cry for help. At the heart of Babel Academy, in the Maruk mansion, on the glass bridge of the main building, the scene shifts to inside the mansion, where Se-jun is hurriedly following In-on from behind. The professor walked and reminded him in a low voice, his gaze more solemn than usual. "Be sure to mind your manners in front of the Academy's headmaster." Not only was he generous enough to overlook you, damaging the hall during the demonstration, Kim In-on paused for half a beat before continuing, "but he's also someone on a completely different level from us." He gave a faint smile, his eyes unusually calm. "You don't need to worry so much, sir." Se-jun quickly stepped inside. Lee stared directly at the young man before him. "You must be student Se-jun?" "The Ascension Emperor, Headmaster Lee of the Academy. Before I turned back time, he was the hero who sacrificed himself in a lone battle against the heaven-annihilating demon god. One of the 6 great demon gods. The image of his tragic death suddenly replayed in my memory. A wave of admiration washed over him. Truly a perfectionist." At that moment, Lee spoke up. "The armaments you demonstrated today were all quite interesting." He suddenly sighed. "I can't say there aren't some regrets, but I have very high expectations for you." Hearing this, Se-jun froze on the spot. "Regrets?" A firestorm brewed in his heart, like the smoldering flames of a forge. "Even though I was prepared for this, I still feel like throwing the 5-colored flame sword and the flame-storing scabbard right back into the forge." Just then, Lee made an offer. "Therefore, in recognition of your talent and effort, I will grant you 2 rewards." He asked seriously. "Tell me what you need." Se-jun's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, surprise was visible on his usually composed face. 2 whole rewards?" He quickly answered, his voice clear and without hesitation. "I desire rewards that can increase my mana capacity and my memory." The moment he finished speaking, Lee swung his arm through the air, and a symbol formed in the empty space. Se-jun stared intently at the 2 treasures. Black ink stone, hero rank, masterpiece quality. A shard with an inky light falls from the darkness, possessing the property of devouring everything except for shadows. It has the ability to absorb mana from anything that comes into contact with the crystal. Dream Ivory. Hero rank. Legend says it is the tusk of a Baku, a creature that eats dreams. It contains dream mana that can cross the boundary between reality and dreams, helping to connect with dreams by using that same dream mana. He showed a bewildered expression. The black inkstone is already precious, but the dream ivory is far rarer. Se-jun smirked. It's a bit difficult to control right now, but I already have an idea of how to use them. He observed him for a long moment, his voice softer, but still carrying weight. Are you satisfied with them? Se-jun bowed his head slightly in gratitude. They are truly magnificent. Right after he left, a voice echoed. What are you planning? The divine mirror grew suspicious about why that boy alone received 2 rewards. This act is not at all in your usual style. Lee gave a brief reply. I gave them to him simply because the child has the capacity to handle them. Upon receiving the answer, it couldn't help but exclaim, Is that so? I just get the feeling he's like a wise old man in a young boy's body. He spoke in a low tone. That only proves that his inner depth is so profound that even you can sense it. Lee watched Se-jun's figure disappear down the ancient corridor. Moreover, even I cannot fully comprehend the depths of that young man. The scene focuses on the mansion named Maru. Inside a classroom, a group of male students were chattering non-stop. Just then, a male student cheerfully approached Han. Hey Han, where do you want to go for lunch? He refused immediately without hesitation. Sorry, I have an appointment with Senior HW today. Hearing this, the student's jaw dropped in astonishment. An appointment with the third-year valedictorian of the VIP department? Han replied nonchalantly. It's just that our families are close, so we see each other often. He said he'd give me some advice about academy life, so that's why we're meeting. The student stepped a bit closer. In that case, if it's all right, could I come along? At that exact moment, Se-jun entered. He glanced at Han with a cold look. The moment they saw Se-jun, the entire classroom fell silent. His eyes once again locked onto Han Baumut. Han involuntarily felt a chill run down his spine. What's with that weird look? Seeing this, Se-jun smirked condescendingly. Looks like he's starting to realize his place. On the other side, Han gritted his teeth, his pride wounded. Damn it, am I going to lose to a low-life like him? The classroom door swung open forcefully. Kim In-on entered with a decisive stride, his stern gaze sweeping across the room. Everyone, settle down in your seats. He glanced around the classroom. All right, it seems everyone is here. Kim In-on turned his gaze to the class and continued. Since this is the first class, we will start with self-introductions. He introduced seriously. This metal ingot is a material called reflective alloy. It is tens of times more sensitive to mana than ordinary ores. For that reason, if you channel your mana into it like this, as he spoke, Kim In-on emphasized each word, an armament from your mind will easily take form. At the same time, Se-jun stared at him with admiration. It's no wonder he's on the list of the world's top 100 artisans. But when I checked the contract stone, I vaguely realized this man is a true genius. Kim In-on paused for a beat, his voice deepening with philosophical weight. Due to its overly sensitive nature, it's very difficult to use as a practical weapon, but it reflects the characteristics of one's subconscious, helping the user see their inner self. He suddenly raised his voice. That is why we call equipment made from reflective alloy alter egos. The refining department's self-introduction will be replaced by the creation of these alter egos. At the end, Kim In-on didn't forget to add, the finished products will be displayed in the main building for 1 week, so do your best. The students replied in unison, yes sir. Se-jun's gaze landed on that other male student. He thought to himself, this reflective alloy must be worth over 10 million won per piece. Just as expected of Babel, even their welcome is extravagant. At the same time, Han flinched as he grasped the sword. Seeing that, he let out an endless sigh. Unbelievable. Se-jun turned away and sighed helplessly. There's not a single person here who possesses the most important talent. Just then, Kim In-on called out, finally, Se-jun. He quickly replied, yes sir. Se-jun thought to himself, I'm already the top student of the department anyway, so there's no reason to hide my abilities anymore. A bold idea suddenly occurred to him. If I'm going to do it. Se-jun's pupils glinted with the fire of ambition. Should I go all out? Then suddenly, a massive explosion erupted right inside the classroom. At the same time, a male student let out a sarcastic remark. There are a ton of people gathered here. It's probably all because of Se-jun's star power, he continued, his tone dripping with sarcasm and annoyance. It's hilarious how they keep hyping him up, saying he's on a different level or whatever, when he's just a first-year student. The person next to him agreed. Exactly. The student leaned in closer and nodded slightly. That's what I've been trying to say. The two of them looked up at the object. Kim In-on's words suddenly echoed in his mind. Although an unusual incident occurred during its creation, where it spontaneously absorbed 19 nearby projection alloys, we assess that this only demonstrates student Se-jun's talent. Therefore, we decided to display it in its original state. A male student let out a dry laugh, his mocking voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. That was definitely just a random accident, caused by some skill. The person next to him jerked his chin toward the creation, his eyes filled with doubt and envy. Didn't this only happen because he used way too many projection alloys at once? The first student chimed in. It's been a long time since we've had a top student from the refining department. They're probably just trying to market him as some kind of prodigy. Just then, Erica suddenly spoke up. Well, I have a slightly different opinion. Jack stepped closer, a smirk playing on his lips. I agree with you. At this, Jack's voice grew strained. It seems like the number of projection alloys available there still wasn't enough to showcase Se-jun's true potential. In another scene, the head of a hammer slammed down hard. At that moment, beads of cold sweat covered Se-jun's face. The man lowered his voice, a look of disbelief flashing in his eyes. Did you manage to time that? Up until now, there hasn't been even a 0.01 second margin of error. Assistant Han stared at him blankly. What in the world are we supposed to teach a kid as brilliant as this? The man chuckled softly. Let's just skip his part. Then he turned and gestured. Does anyone want to see a demonstration? A while later, Assistant Han announced, All right, class dismissed. Over here, Se-jun's eyes were still glued to the hammer, and then he stared intently at the metal fragments on the table. Without hesitation, Se-jun raised the hammer once more. Assistant Han suddenly spoke up. Are you planning on smashing it? He immediately stopped and bowed politely to the teaching assistant. The man walked closer, reminding him, We need to turn these items in after this week's smithing class, so please don't break them. Se-jun tilted his head slightly. We have to turn them in? Assistant Han wore a weary expression. How else do you think the students get their operating budget? The department provides support based on the number of weapons sold on the open market. He thought for a moment before questioning him. So, what exactly are you unhappy with right now? Is it your physical condition? Or your mana? At the unexpected question, Se-jun let out a small laugh. The biggest problem right now is my body. In that moment, a complex thought crossed his mind. To create training tools, I need to forge Mactite ore, but I lack the stamina to do that kind of work. The assistant tilted his head, his suggestive tone offering a tempting shortcut. If it's really necessary for your forging, he said after a moment's thought, offering a solution. Wouldn't it be faster to use enhancement charms instead of physical training? Hearing this, he couldn't help but laugh. I never even considered that option, because it's the very method I always avoided before I returned to the past. The corners of Se-jun's lips curled up as if he'd just discovered a new path. Come to think of it, since I've returned to the past and am currently having stamina issues, I can totally forge Mactite ore while under the effects of an enhancement charm. He bowed his head slightly. Thank you very much for the helpful advice. Assistant Han shook his head slightly. It's no big deal. Then Se-jun looked up, his gaze shifting to the sword in the assistant's hand. While the assistant was in the middle of casting, he couldn't help but offer a tip. You're using way more mana than necessary. You should reduce it to about 70% of your current output, and instead, focus your strike on a single point. Before leaving, Se-jun stated with certainty, doing it that way will be much more effective for you right now. Hearing this, the man forced a smile. Did a freshman just give a teaching assistant pointers? Then, Assistant Han turned to look at the hammer. Just then, the heat from the sky intensified. The academy always encouraged proactive self-study for each individual student. A system voice rang out as a door began to open, the instructor's voice broadcasting continuously. You have the right to register for classes from other departments, or even take dozens of courses in a single semester. However, you are required to complete all of your major's core subjects, and if you accumulate 3 failing grades, you will be expelled immediately. You have complete freedom, but you must take responsibility for your choices. Suddenly, a PA announcement came on. Next stop is UR, the designated area for the magic department. Just then, Se-jun calmly stepped off the train. As soon as he looked up, Erica appeared out of nowhere. A male student blocked his path, his voice dripping with provocation. Hey, stop blocking the way, move it. Se-jun frowned. Who the hell are these guys? Popping up out of nowhere, looking for a fight? He raised his voice in response. You're the ones who need to get out of the way. Hearing this, the male student's body trembled with rage. Erica stepped closer. She asked curiously, Where are you headed? The male student was completely stunned by Erica's sudden action. Lady Erica. Over here, Se-jun answered honestly. To the magic department. I was wondering if there are any minors I could sign up for. Seeing this, she decisively made an offer. In that case, let me show you the way. The other guy quickly interjected. Lady Erica, the meeting is about to start. She cut him off flatly. You all can go on your own. The student looked frantic, but the seniors said they were really hoping you'd be there. Erica shot him a cold glance, her voice calm but leaving no room for argument. I'm not interested. Back to Se-jun. His expression was unwavering. The two of them quickly walked away, ignoring the male student calling out, "Lady Erica." Once things quieted down, Erica turned to him, her gaze suddenly much more serious. "What kind of minor are you looking for, exactly?" Se-jun answered slowly. "I'm trying to learn more about enhancement charms." She continued to ask, "What kind of enhancement effect, specifically?" He calmly replied, "Something that can enhance physical abilities, but it absolutely must not interfere with the forging process." Hearing this, Erica suggested, "Then how about trying barrier magic?" Se-jun froze. "Barrier magic? Isn't that type of magic usually just for defense?" She slowly explained. "It can be very versatile, depending on how you use it." Erica took a thin piece of paper from her pocket and gestured, "Let me give you an example." She handed him the paper. "Try tearing this." Se-jun took it, clearly feeling a thin layer of mana covering its surface, and was slightly surprised. Did she just increase its durability? No, that wasn't quite it. It still maintained its original properties but would automatically become much tougher when subjected to a strong external force. Se-jun stared at the piece of paper. At the same time, he analyzed that this technique was perfect for forging, as it required extremely meticulous control. Erica let out a soft laugh. "For complex applications like this, you'll probably need a professor's help." He stared blankly at the paper, a suspicion growing in his mind. "Wait, this magic formula looks really familiar." Meanwhile, she rattled on. "The professor for barrier construction married someone from a branch family of my clan. So, I can introduce you to him directly if you'd like." At this, Erica raised her voice slightly, waiting for an answer. Then, suddenly, Se-jun exclaimed, "This is it!" The paper immediately ripped. Seeing this, she couldn't help but feel a little bewildered. "You managed to understand my family's barrier magic in that short amount of time, and you even dispelled it?" Morning at the magic department of UR University. Se-jun's appearance next to her in the middle of campus left everyone stunned, making them the center of curious stares and endless whispers. "Why is Erica with some guy from another department? I think I saw them together yesterday too." If I remember correctly, they were at the exhibition together as well. Amidst all the stares and whispers filling the campus, he could only let out a helpless sigh. False rumors sure do spread fast. Why do these people love meddling in other people's business so much? How ridiculous. If Erica actually had feelings for me, there would already be a bond between us. Anyway, I wonder what criteria they use to select people for the class. I registered for this class, but they require you to pass a test first. Erica immediately spoke up. "This is where the barrier construction test will be held." Se-jun started looking around, then asked doubtfully, "This forest?" The other candidates couldn't stop cursing in frustration. Damn it, where in the world is this remote place? He silently observed the forest before him and thought to himself, "Are we on some kind of treasure hunt for a test? This is starting to get annoying. Did they use a barrier to hide something?" Se-jun accidentally stepped on a strange spot, causing the barrier surrounding the forest to shatter instantly. As soon as the barrier broke at Se-jun's feet, the teaching assistant appeared and announced loudly, "You've passed the test." He was so shocked he could only blurt out in amazement, "What?" Robert Burry looked up at the teaching assistant standing by the desk with a doubtful expression. "That young lady is showing interest in our department's top student?" To Professor Robert Berry, a specialist in barrier construction at UR's magic department, the teaching assistant held out his phone and replied, "That's right, take a look at this list." He looked at the list on the TA's phone and remarked with skepticism, "I also found it strange that she would suddenly apply for a basic class like this. Thanks to her appeal, the number of applicants has tripled. But I'm not happy about it, since we also got a request from the young master of the Inn family. So this year, we'll be adding a test using the Labyrinth of Lost Souls. The Labyrinth of Lost Souls is a type of barrier that confuses the senses, causing one to lose their bearings. Although it's only a rudimentary barrier, someone completely ignorant of magic wouldn't even notice its presence." Witnessing the scene before him, Robert was stunned into silence, marveling internally as he realized the boy's true ability. Even without the young lady's help, he was able to break that labyrinth with just his instincts. He announced loudly to the crowd, "All of you here have passed the first round. From now on, we will divide the class based on the second test." A student confidently raised his hand. "Allow me to go first." The student thought to himself that this was a golden opportunity to impress Erica. Robert nodded in approval. "Very well. The content of the second test is also very simple. Use your mana to dismantle the active barrier before you. I will grade you based on your completion time. So be quick and precise." The test began. A spiderweb-shaped barrier appeared, with a spider at its center acting as the core. This spider will continuously flee when it senses mana traveling along the threads, and as long as it exists, this web will regenerate forever. Seeing the barrier, the student who had volunteered froze, his mind racing, to envelop the entire magic structure the conventional way. "I don't have enough mana. In that case, I'll just overwhelm it with speed." The professor looked down at his watch and remarked sternly, 2 minutes and 23 seconds. You need to focus more on understanding the barrier's structure. Regardless, that result isn't too bad. The student glanced over at the young lady, hoping for some encouragement, but Erica's face remained expressionless, as indifferent as a calm lake, leaving the student to simply bow his head dejectedly and reply, "Thank you, Professor." Then, Robert ordered decisively, "Next person, hurry up, next." After everyone had tried, he declared helplessly, "All of you will be starting in the basic class. Next up is Erica Eno. You may begin." She stepped forward with an unusual calm. Erica simply raised a single finger and gently touched the barrier. The entire barrier instantly lit up brightly before shattering into 100 pieces. In the dead silence, the faces of the surrounding students were dumbstruck with astonishment. Immediately after, whispers began to rise like crashing waves. How can she be that astonishingly fast? She completely dismantled the formula and brought the entire barrier down. That's the valedictorian for you. Amidst the continuing applause, he slowly stepped forward. Robert glanced at the stopwatch and spoke coldly. 22 seconds. Well done. But if you'd used the standard dismantling method, you might have been 2 seconds faster. Faced with Robert's harsh critique, Erica didn't waver, simply bowing her head slightly and replying calmly, "I will keep that in mind." He said nothing more. His sharp eyes flickered to the next student, a silent warning of his incredibly high standards, before he called out the name. And finally, Se-jun. As Se-jun stepped forward, Robert silently sized him up. He doesn't look like much, he thought. Let's see what he's really capable of. Instead of rushing to deploy his magic or going through some elaborate preparation, he casually sat down right in front of the barrier. The whispers among the students began to grow louder. What the hell is he doing? Doesn't he know the test is being timed? Se-jun remained perfectly calm, his gaze steady as he mentally peeled apart the energy barrier's structure, layer by layer. This barrier has properties very similar to inkstone, namely, its ability to self-repair and revert to its original state if an attack doesn't reach a certain threshold. That's why, in order to forge this stone, a smith must channel every single impulse at the exact same time, with perfect precision. At last, Robert's patience wore thin. He strode closer and demanded, "What kind of trick are you trying to pull?" "Wait!" Her voice cut through the air. "Just let him be." Faced with Erica's commanding tone, he could only fall silent. Robert said no more. His lips pressed into a thin line as he stepped back. In the absolute silence, Se-jun's mind was working at maximum speed. "So, if I do this, can I preserve the impulses that have built up inside the stone?" Instead of shattering or dissipating as usual, the moment his finger touched its weak point, the entire barrier erupted in a violent blaze. Amidst an atmosphere thick with astonishment, Se-jun spoke in a normal, indifferent voice, as if he had just finished a trivial chore. "Finished. With this," he thought to himself, "I can finally forge the inkstone." Se-jun stood up, walking past the shattered remnants with an air of indifference, as if its existence had never meant anything. The moment the barrier fell, he walked away decisively, ignoring all the stares around him. The teaching assistant looked at the clock and announced, "Time, 7 minutes and 45 seconds. Robert watched Se-jun silently walk away, thinking, the time he took is completely irrelevant. He might have taken 7 minutes this time, but I'm certain that the next time he encounters a similar barrier, he'll destroy it in the blink of an eye. He didn't just break the barrier, he established a formula to nullify the magic itself. She watched his lonely figure, her eyes filled with anxiety. Erica thought, if his divine forging skills were combined with magic, I'd truly be worried about what kind of terrifying artifact he might create. A letter arrived with a notification. We have received an application for the intermediate forging test, using hero grade or higher materials from the first-year student, Se-jun, in accordance with Article 8 of the workshop's safety regulations. Anyone who wishes to supervise, please contact us. The instructor stared at his computer screen and mused. I wonder how many people will show up for this one. Suddenly, messages began flooding in, shocking him. Wow, people are responding fast. However, absolutely no one from Vice Principal Michael's faction sent in a request. Rumor has it things are pretty tense over there since his son got knocked down to second place. It seems the rumors were true. The instructor started to consider his options. All right then, I should start picking people. His eyes widened in shock as he read a message that said, the principal has announced that she will personally supervise student Se-jun's intermediate forging session. Suddenly, Eun-ha appeared and spoke up. It's been a while, student Se-jun. He froze, completely shocked. Someone as busy as you came all the way out here in person? She replied nonchalantly, in her capacity as the principal. I came to verify your abilities with my own eyes. Se-jun didn't look directly at Eun-ha, simply replying softly, if that's how it's going to be, then I have no choice but to pour all my effort into crafting this. With that, he immediately began forging on the spot. The first step in forging inkstone. In truth, there are many ways to process this stone, but the most difficult technique of all is the night process. You must place the stone in a space of complete, pitch-black darkness, then use your mana to separate the impurities from the inkstone, which flows like water. During this stage, even the slightest error in mana control will cause the stone to instantly solidify, rendering it useless. It might sound easy, but in reality, it's no different from restructuring matter itself. She remained completely silent, observing Lee Se-jun's every move. While his hands moved rhythmically, Lee Se-jun's mind began to calculate coldly. Is 14 the absolute best limit I can achieve? If I reduce it any further, its performance will be insufficient. Step 2. He began to conjure a blazing red flame directly from the palm of his hand. The terrifying heat enveloped the metal, causing the space around them to twist with Lee Se-jun's every breath. He channeled mana through the crimson flame to filter out and select the appropriate firepower. This stabilized flame is called flowing wildfire, and it possesses the ability to maintain the exact same temperature as the moment it was created. Step 3. Use a hammer wreathed in flowing wildfire to strike the heavy inkstone. The key is to never rest until the distortion is reduced by the properties of the flame. Watching the blazing fire, Unha mused to herself, even if he's immune to fire, that doesn't mean he doesn't feel pain. Just how much has he worn himself down? He swung the hammer down again and again with a strange, fervent passion. While the sound of the hammer echoed throughout the workshop, in a quiet corner of the school campus, Erica was still silently waiting for Lee Se-jun. Despite Lee Se-jun's passionate, selfless work, Unha, standing nearby, seemed completely uninterested. She kept yawning, looking sleepy, tired, and listless. 4 hours of forging had passed. The properties of the inkstone, having absorbed the flame to its absolute limit, were beginning to change. He let out a sigh of relief, thinking to himself, "It's done." The deformation stopped. He melted the processed inkstone and poured it into a pre-prepared mold. The weary look on Unha's face instantly vanished, replaced by a look of utter astonishment. She thought, casting, not forging? The properties will change because of the darkness deep inside the mold. What on earth is he thinking? Just as Lee Se-jun was about to start the fourth step, Unha suddenly spoke up to stop him. Wait. Despite her firm warning, he didn't stop at all. Lee Se-jun's mind was racing, filled with only numbers and magical structures, slowing the changes in the inkstone with a formula that broke through the barrier and created a magic circuit in that brief moment. Just as the magic circuit took shape during the inkstone's fleeting transformation, everything suddenly went still, revealing the finished product in Lee Se-jun's hands. The final result was an ink spider bracelet, deep and silent black. The moment the bracelet formed, a mechanical sound rang out, shattering the silence. A system notification suddenly appeared before his eyes. Permanent item, ink spider bracelet, has been completed. To shatter preconceptions, a bold challenge that spares no one is necessary. Although the material's potential has not been fully realized, the blacksmith's skill in forging new possibilities is worthy of being called first class. You have acquired the skill Black Soul Thread. Ink spider bracelet, rare grade, medium quality. A bracelet crafted by smelting heavy inkstone. It possesses the ability to absorb the wearer's magic power, and its weight increases in proportion to that power. It absorbs and stores the wearer's magic power and can use the skill Burst Ring. Amidst the dead silence, Lee Se-jun let out a quiet sigh and spoke. It's a success. In the silent atmosphere, Unha's stomach let out a loud rumble, as if announcing its hunger to the whole world. He froze, giving her a bewildered, expression. As she blushed with embarrassment, she quickly covered her stomach with her hands, trying to hide her body's betrayal. Lee Se-jun could only look up at the sky and let out a helpless sigh, as if he'd just witnessed a legend crumble before his very eyes. He observed it and offered his opinion. Could this be a resonance phenomenon? It's impressive. It looks simple, but its power isn't overwhelming. If we do this right, we can aim to create a set item effect. He acted as if nothing had happened, calmly presenting the item to her and saying, I apologize for not being able to give you a weapon when you're in trouble because of me. I don't know if this will help much, sort of like a palate cleanser, but please, at least take it. Lee Se-jun said nothing more, simply holding his posture and staring intently at Unha. She took the item from Lee Se-jun and suddenly activated her unique skill, Soul Furnace. Unha took a small taste and then commented, This is quite delicious. He blurted out, Really? She replied casually, Yeah, metaphorically speaking. It tastes like crispy, fried bits. Lee Se-jun thought to himself, What a relief. Have I developed a habit of making everything to Ryuha's taste? Maybe I can increase my bond with her easily. He smiled gently at Unha and said softly, I'm glad you like it. She nodded in satisfaction and said, Of course, though it's a bit of a shame to eat this when those other items are right in front of me. By the way, when do you plan on dealing with the 5-color blade and the accumulated fire scabbard? Se-jun slowly shook his head, his gaze maintaining its characteristic calmness as he replied, I don't intend to sell them right now. Yunha paused, a look of confusion mixed with a hint of impatience on her face. She pressed, Excuse me, what do you mean? Is the price not high enough? He answered calmly, I'm keeping them to prepare for the conquest class. Se-jun smiled faintly and thought, Besides, they say hunger is the best spice. He nodded as if making a promise and said, Once I have gear worthy of giving you, I'll let you know first. She blushed with embarrassment, pushing aside her awkwardness to regain her composure, then said, I'll look forward to it. Is the smithing session completely finished now? He immediately replied, Yes. Unha then prompted, Then let's go. The staff will come to clean up. Se-jun answered in a hoarse voice, Thank goodness, I don't have any strength left to clean anyway. As he was walking, he suddenly felt dizzy and fell backward. She rushed to catch Se-jun. Unha asked worriedly, Are you okay? He quickly composed himself and replied, Yes, I'm fine. I think I might have mismanaged my stamina a little. She then offered, Let me take you to the dorms. Or, Are you afraid of heights? Se-jun answered firmly, I'm not. Immediately, Unha swept him up in a princess carry, catching him completely off guard. Let's go. She planted one foot to launch herself. Unha shot off like a flash of lightning into the air. While still carrying him, Unha felt the magic power circulating and thought, That mold I just ate can draw out this much power? As he was being carried and whisked through the air at a terrifying speed, Se-jun could only surrender helplessly, thinking, In many ways, the current situation has changed a lot compared to before I returned to the past. At that moment, Erica was still waiting patiently for him on the school grounds. Hasn't Se-jun shown up yet? I need to give him this invitation. On the free forum for the metallurgy department of Babel Academy, an anonymous user posted a picture of Erica, asking, Why is that girl here? Isn't she the top entrant of the combat department? A flood of utterly confused comments appeared. Someone chimed in, She's been standing motionless in front of the main metallurgy building for 3 hours now. Shivers. Then, a bunch of people replied to that comment. Is she waiting for the top student of the metallurgy department? I saw her waiting for him at the dorms last time, too. Is that all it is? If so, can't you just call him and tell him to come down? You idiot. I was just guessing. Am I not allowed to? Damn it. Se-jun had seen all of this, and he helplessly wondered, What the hell is going on? Se-jun tried to calm himself down. Whatever. If it's really important, I'm sure they'll find me again. Just then, the classroom door opened. A middle-aged man walked in and introduced himself. It's a pleasure to meet all of you. Starting today, I will be in charge of the Understanding Tools class. My name is Ricardos Myers. He slammed his hand against the door, commanding everyone's attention. First, everyone head to the training center. The last one to arrive will be punished with 20 laps around the stadium. Begin. As soon as Ricardos Myers finished speaking, the students scrambled to their feet and took off running. Why are they suddenly making us run like this? Se-jun was also tense in the middle of the crowd. Wasn't this supposed to be a theory class? They kept grumbling, I have no idea, let's just run for now. Eventually, they all arrived. Se-jun was punished by Ricardos and had to run the full 20 laps. He casually replied while jogging, Yes sir, I'm running. Seeing this, the people around him couldn't stop gossiping. This guy's stamina is so pathetic, it couldn't be any worse. I wonder if he can even properly complete the intermediate training. A moment later, Ricardos Myers came forward and called out, All right, everyone, listen up. He began to explain seriously. Initially, the Understanding Tools course was designed to teach the theory behind the structure of various types of equipment. However, due to the recent fire sword hunts, we must change our training methods. There have been attacks targeting blacksmiths capable of forging hero-grade fire swords or higher. Those individuals are called fire sword hunters. Listening as he ran, Se-jun thought to himself, Even before I returned to the past, that was still an unsolved case. The man continued, No matter how solid of a defense system you prepare, in the end, the only thing that can protect you is your own body. Then, Ricardos Myers raised his voice to advise them. Therefore, along with studying tools in this class, you will also be taught skills for self-defense. The students replied in unison. Yes, sir. Pleased, Ricardos Myers announced. Very good. Today's lesson will be about swords. Se-jun was still telling himself, This time, I need to be a little more careful. His feet never stopped moving. To do that, the first priority is to improve my own physical stamina. Se-jun's hand clenched slightly as he silently assessed. Even though I made it myself, its effect is incredibly potent. The system displayed the information. This is a bracelet forged from inkstone, capable of absorbing the wearer's mana to increase its corresponding weight. It stores and draws on the owner's mana, allowing the activation of the burst circle skill. The burst circle skill helps control gravity within a 1-meter radius around the user. Looking at the system's displayed stats, he set a goal for himself. My basic stats have all increased by an average of about 5 points. Before the first year is over, I absolutely have to make this body stronger, no matter what. After a while, Ricardo Myers finally turned and called to Se-jun. Stop running and get over here. He glanced down at his hand again, thinking, burst ring. The man secretly assessed Se-jun. His physical condition seems better than I expected. Then, Ricardo Myers held a sword out to him. He suggested, let's see if you have an aptitude for swordsmanship. Try swinging this sword. Se-jun took it and observed it for a moment. It'll probably be a bit difficult to move fluidly because of the inkstone bracelet. He hesitated internally. It's not exactly a properly honed technique. But should I try using that move? Finally, Se-jun decided and swung the sword down. The students watching immediately burst out in derisive laughter. So slow. He must be exhausted after finishing that run. Even so, his form doesn't look half bad. But Ricardo Myers had a completely different assessment. No. It's actually excellent. Your sword path seems to have already clearly defined the direction it needs to go, he commented as he turned. However, your rhythm is still too hasty. It would be best to correct that before continuing. In an instant, Se-jun's gaze became sharp. Ricardo Myers' entire body trembled, and the space around him seemed to turn completely white in his vision. Ricardo Myers' eyes froze. He looked in confusion at the sword held right at his neck. Ricardo Myers wondered to himself, did I really just feel fear from a technical student, to the point of having such a terrifying hallucination? Then he hesitantly inquired, who taught you that swordsmanship? Se-jun smiled faintly, but internally, he was completely bewildered. Why did that move even work? He once said, it was just a technique he came up with on the spot in about 10 minutes. Se-jun recalled old memories. Back then, Wang Shu had scratched his ear and said, look, I already told you I'd pay you back next time. People fall on hard times. Why are you in such a rush? He pleaded relentlessly. Can I pay with a technique instead of money? It's one technique. I'll teach it to you, so please just stop. Back in the present, a flustered Se-jun scratched his head and lied, I just watch a lot of videos of other heroes' battles. Ricardo Myers was skeptical, but still smiled and asked, swordsmanship, do you truly want to receive proper training? He offered. I will prepare a letter of recommendation for you to join the body control class at Aga Quif. That afternoon at the Aga Quif Center, Se-jun stood bewildered in the middle of a crowd. Wang Shu was stomping his foot furiously. How many times do I have to tell you I have nothing left to teach you? But Jack wouldn't listen. Please, sir, don't treat me like this. He was a retired S-rank hero and also a regular customer. Wang Shu, the man known as the Swordbreaker. Se-jun found it a little hard to believe. This guy who's always drunk and lost in gambling is a professor? Seeing him appear, Wang Shu asked, and who are you? Se-jun presented the letter and introduced himself. I'm Se-jun, a first-year student in the metallurgy department. I came here on the recommendation of Professor Ricardo Myers, he asked, slightly surprised. Ricardo Myers recommended you? Jack also scrambled to his feet to explain. That kid is the top student of the BOSPA department this year. He assessed him bluntly. No matter how you look at him, he seems completely ordinary. Then Wang Shu continued his questioning. Hey, you. Are you really that desperate to learn from me? He eagerly affirmed. Yes, that's right. Hearing this, the man pointed at Se-jun and proposed. All right then, if you can defeat that kid, I'll agree to take you on. He set up the match for the two of them. It's just a single round. The first person to land a valid hit on their opponent wins. Wang Shu waved his hand as a signal. Then, let the match begin. The moment he finished speaking, Jack rushed forward. Se-jun, however, remained standing still, tightening his grip on his sword. A sliver of doubt entered Wang Shu's mind. Is he relaxing his body to maximize flexibility by completely negating his muscle strength? If that's the case, the most basic counter is to grapple instead of launching a direct strike. Meanwhile, Jack swung his arm to attack. Wang Shu sighed in frustration. This is exactly why I hate show-offs. All scheming and mind games, without a single decent fight, he complained. Not fun at all. What a buzzkill. Right after that, Jack lunged forward and wrapped his arms around Se-jun's waist. He gritted his teeth in shock. What is this monstrous strength? Then, Se-jun said to himself as he activated the skill, Bursting Ring, its power erupting in a blinding flash. Se-jun had successfully turned the tables, letting out a pained hiss. Se-jun's fist was right in front of Jack's face, as blood dripped from his nose. Seeing this, he smiled faintly and asked, Looks like I was a little faster, wasn't I? The space quickly fell silent. A moment later, Jack finally spoke. That attack just now was really. Before he could finish, Wang Shu ordered, Everyone, disperse now. I remember I promised to teach you only if you won. Hearing that, Se-jun sat up and suggested, Since he lost to me, shouldn't you be teaching me instead? He then started to taunt him. I can't believe the top student of Agape lost to a student from the arcane arts department. Just hearing about it sounds pathetic. Jack was stunned. Pathetic? Seeing this, Wang Shu also chimed in. That's a fair point. Perhaps I should whip this idiot into shape a bit, so he's strong enough to take care of himself. He excitedly turned and exclaimed, Then, the old man instructed, I'll arrange a time and send it to you. Make sure you're there on time. This made Jack overjoyed. He bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude. Thank you so much, sir. Wang Shu sighed in annoyance and waved him off. If you're done, you can leave now. Then he turned to Se-jun and said, I still have private matters to discuss with this kid. After the room was empty, except for the two of them, Wang Shu requested, Show me that sword technique you used to deal with Ricardos Myers again. He quickly complied. Understood. Se-jun looked at him nervously, then lunged forward with the sharp blade in his hand. However, in an instant, Wang Shu knocked Se-jun's sword away. He stood there, stunned, as he listened to the man's assessment. This is a move meant to finish an opponent at first glance. Wang Shu stated coldly. The idea is pretty good, but the execution is still very crude. Do you think it's normal for a sword technique to reveal its weakness after being used just a second time? He scolded angrily. If anyone dared to teach this to someone else and call it good, I'd break their arms and legs. But Wang Shu had no idea that he was the one who had taught it. Wang Shu sighed and proposed, Just you wait. I'm going to build a complete body on top of this flimsy technical framework of yours. Se-jun casually asked back, So, does that mean I'm officially enrolled in the class? Wang Shu confirmed with absolute certainty. Of course it does. Hearing this, he was relieved and took his leave. Well then, I'll be heading out for today. After Se-jun left, Wang Shu glanced after him and mused, That kid is so rigid. Once outside, Se-jun sighed in annoyance. He acts so high and mighty, even though he's just providing after-sales service. Just then, Jack Myers approached to greet him. Hey, you there. He replied in surprise. You haven't left yet? Then he took out a letter, explaining, I have something I want to give you. Se-jun blurted out, confused. What is this? So, he explained. An invitation to join Noblesse. It's basically a gathering place for students from prestigious families. Se-jun realized, could it be that Erica intended to give this to me all along? Jack said excitedly. There are a lot of snobs there, but I think this would be a great opportunity for you. However, Se-jun was a bit hesitant. I'm not sure if I should just accept something like this. He smiled brightly and said, It's thanks to you that I got into that class, so this is the least I can do to show my gratitude. Seeing that, Se-jun also smiled and said, Thanks. A little while later, as he was walking, he mentally reviewed his electives. The ones I've signed up for so far are barrier weaving and body control. I also want to try an elective from the arcane arts department. Right now, I'm considering curses, alchemy, and enchantment. Lost in thought, he accidentally bumped into someone. Se-jun stopped and began to apologize. Excuse me. His gaze suddenly froze. A girl had grabbed his wrist and was examining it. Did you make this yourself? Se-jun stated bluntly. And what if I did? Then she offered, How about I enchant it for you? A system notification quickly popped up. A link with the target, named Leah Claudel, has been successfully established. Leah Claudel is someone who can upgrade equipment by 2 whole tiers through enchantment, a genius among geniuses who has crafted legendary equipment, the one known for completely revolutionizing the enchantment industry. Leah shouted in amazement. An inkstone? And at the rare level? She studied it intently. If I just add a few formulas to this. No, it's too amazing to stop at just that. Then Leah clutched her head, exhausted. This won't do. How am I supposed to solve this dilemma? Witnessing this, Se-jun silently noted, I can't believe she's this eccentric. Then he asked flatly, Is the equipment no good? Leah quickly explained the problem. The problem is, there are too many things I want to do with it. It's forged from inkstone, but why is its compatibility so astonishingly high? There are too many formulas I can apply. I just can't decide. Hearing this, Se-jun placed something on the table and said, If that's the case, then this should be fine. Seeing her confusion, he reminded her, There's more. Se-jun carefully instructed her, Furthermore, it has a resonance phenomenon, so please keep that in mind. Leah asked excitedly, You, who in the world are you? He casually introduced himself. I'm Se-jun, a first year in the metallurgy department and also the top student of the arcane arts department this year. She was completely taken aback and exclaimed, A first year? That's incredible. I'm a third year in the enchantment department. Just then, someone approached and interrupted their conversation. I need to talk to you. Follow me for a moment. Se-jun quickly recognized him. Isn't that Erica's lackey? Leah stood up, annoyed, and snapped. Can't you see we were talking first? The guy finally lowered his voice and said, I want to resolve this peacefully, so please give me a few minutes of your time. Se-jun coldly shot back. If you have something to say it here. At that, the guy sighed and demanded, apologize for your rude behavior towards Lady Erica. How dare you tear up the invitation the young lady gave you in front of everyone? Se-jun replied, confused. But she's the one who told me to tear it up. His eyes immediately flared with anger as he scolded. Sure, you've got your own excuses. You should have just never accepted the invitation from the Myers family in the first place. Se-jun asked irritably. Did Erica send you here? The guy quickly denied it. No, this was entirely my own idea. Just then, Leah let out a sarcastic laugh. Yeah, right, she said, calling him out. Is there anyone who doesn't know you're the young master's most trusted subordinate? This enraged the guy. How dare a failure like you? You might be delusional enough to think you're someone special right now, he criticized Se-jun. But Babel has no shortage of geniuses who are far beyond your level. However, Se-jun casually replied, when you say that, are you referring to yourself? Se-jun's words hit him like a lightning bolt. The man roared in anger. Shut your mouth. Se-jun watched his power erupt, but still calmly reached out his hand. With a single hand, he was able to block the charging phantom beasts. As a surge of magical power suddenly vanished, he commented thoughtfully, just as I thought. That thing wasn't created purely from magic. Did you use your dagger as a medium to attack, even though they were just illusions? This made the guy stammer in fear. How could you? Se-jun casually spun the weapon in his hand and answered, who knows? He laughed, thrilled. This looks pretty tasty. At the same time, the system announced that the link sigil for the greedy iron had been officially activated. The guy cried out helplessly. My 1 million is gone. Se-jun smirked. With a taste this good, no wonder you were going crazy for it. The system displayed the link information again. Ruha, greedy iron, supreme high-quality grade. A type of iron capable of generating thermal energy by devouring other types of iron. It corrodes metal on contact, absorbing their cores into itself, hunting and consuming iron to create mineral blood. Remaining durability, 78%. Circle burst. In an instant, Se-jun rushed forward and punched the guy straight in the stomach, and just like that, the man collapsed to the ground. Se-jun turned to Leah. So, senior. He glanced at her and asked, are there any lectures in the enhancement department you think are worth recommending? Leah's face suddenly turned red, and she quickly spoke up. Ancient enhancement. There's also an incredibly brilliant senior there named Leah Claudel. After they left, the man clutched his stomach in pain. Damn it all, he grumbled nonstop. I can't believe a new student has such incredible reflexes. Just then, Erica appeared in front of him. Excuse me, I'd like to borrow that dagger for a moment. He jumped in surprise and yelled, Lady Erica, how long have you been here? The subordinate respectfully handed it to her. Here it is, my lady. Erica looked at the sword in her hand and reminded him, you don't need to report this to my brother. As for the head of the family, I'll speak with him personally later. He scratched his head in confusion and replied, yes, I understand. Erica silently assessed it. So it really is a piece of equipment used as a conduit. It has an anti-theft sigil carved into it. She felt a bit baffled. Could it be that he created a counterskill himself, based on his magic and Professor Roberts? Erica started to feel uncertain. Se-jun, his talent for blacksmithing techniques might even surpass S-rank. I definitely have to adjust my evaluation of his magic compatibility to A-rank. Suddenly, the system displayed a message. A link with the subject named Erica Eno has been established. This left Se-jun bewildered. What's going on? He began to wonder if she had been secretly watching him fight that subordinate. Se-jun held the blades in his hand, feeling a bit helpless. Well, at least I got some decent compensation. I'm still short by 10 blades. Leaving them like this is a bit crude, but they should work fine if I combine them with the black spirit thread. He yawned and sighed. Oh well, let's put that aside for now. I was really looking forward to Professor Kim In-on's class, but I never expected to spend the whole day just listening to boring theories I already know by heart. Right after that, Kim In-on spoke in a serious tone. That's enough explanation. Now, let's get to the main part. He picked up an item on the desk and explained, even if you use the exact same type of metal, its shape will change completely, depending on how you adjust the arrangement of your magic. A stone suddenly appeared as Kim In-on spoke. The ability to apply this metal deformation technique is the deciding factor in a weapon's versatility. He placed different stones on the table. Then, Kim In-on turned it back into the original piece of iron, stating firmly, that's why, if you've chosen the path of a blacksmith, you must perfectly grasp the potential of the metal you're working with. Kim In-on presented the task. In today's class, we will practice the deformation technique on these iron ingots. He had someone distribute the stones and then gave the instructions. First, use your magic flow to create a scratch. About 3 centimeters deep right in the center of the iron ingot. This material has been refined to be extremely sensitive to deformation, so you must be very careful. Se-jun thought to himself. It seems that, in the end, he doesn't completely deny magic-based forging methods. Kim In-on announced loudly, "Your time limit is 10 minutes. You may all begin now." The students were completely baffled by the ingots in their hands. "Why is this happening to me?" Everyone grumbled. "It won't go back to its original shape anymore." Just then, two people stepped forward. Se-jun said calmly, "I'm finished." Han glanced over at him and reported, "I'm done as well." Kim In-on praised them with satisfaction. "Very good. You two may move on to the next stage of training." Then he presented a new problem. "I will now demonstrate a different arrangement pattern. Try to follow along." Han glanced at Se-jun, full of confidence. "My speed and level of completion are on par with his. This time, I'll definitely win." Kim In-on continued to explain. "Next up is the arrangement, according to this diagram." Han hastily began, brimming with confidence. "My chance is finally here." Han happily thought to himself that he would complete it perfectly and impress everyone. But, after he finished, Kim In-on made another request. "Han Baumut, try returning that iron bar to its original state." Han was immediately stunned and asked, "Excuse me, sir, what did you just say?" When he tried to do it, he became flustered. "Oh, why did it turn out like this?" Han realized helplessly that the arrangement of the monocurrents had been completely destroyed. Seeing this, Kim In-on spoke up, "That iron bar couldn't withstand the deformation you just performed. In other words, it proves that your method was flawed from the very first step." He asked in confusion, "But I'm sure I did exactly what the professor instructed." He bowed his head low and explained, "What I emphasized earlier was that you must fully comprehend the inherent potential of the metal." Kim In-on continued his critique. "If you can't restore the affected monostructure, it's no longer a deformation but a severe degradation of the equipment. It will become a major variable affecting its quality and performance. So, you must study this part carefully in the future." After listening, Han also bowed his head and replied, "I will remember your teachings well, sir." Then he glanced at Se-jun, wondering, did that guy really understand the key point? In the end, he decided for himself. No way, he probably just got lucky while he was spacing out. However, right after that, Se-jun succeeded. It actually worked. He managed to return the iron bar to its original form. This left all the students completely bewildered. What? Didn't the professor just say that method was impossible? This can't be happening. Even In-on was baffled. "Student Se-jun, would you be so kind as to perform that deformation technique for me one more time?" Se-jun thought helplessly. "I've accidentally made him misunderstand." He explained sheepishly, "This is only possible because this is a special type of iron adjusted specifically for students. If this were a normal, standard iron bar, it would definitely be impossible." Watching everything unfold, Kim In-on had a realization. "I see. It was possible because of the responsive properties of this refined iron bar." He thought pensively, "I can't believe even I overlooked that important detail." A conqueror of peaks and also the greatest blacksmith, Leans, the holy fire. He created it during his years as an S-rank hero, and for the many decades that have passed since then, no one has been able to disprove it. The deformation formula, considered the core of every blacksmith in the world, the truth of steel. Thinking this, Kim In-on hesitated slightly. Surely, he couldn't have found another way, right? Should I believe that such a thing is possible for this kid? Se-jun turned away, thinking to himself, if he figures it out again this time, it'll be the second time in a row. As it grew dark outside, Kim In-on spoke up. "Class is dismissed. You may all leave." "Student, Se-jun, could you stay behind for a moment?" He stopped and asked, "Yes, sir? Is something the matter?" Kim In-on took out an item and began, "This is a gift to welcome you to the academy. You helped me a great deal with the move." The system also displayed the item's information. Blood Flame Gem. Rare grade, high quality. An ore containing the essence of the crimson flame. It possesses a special ability used specifically for melting down mixed ores into a liquid state. Se-jun asked with some hesitation, "What is this?" The professor promptly answered, "If you can absorb the essence from this flame gem, you will permanently enhance your crimson flame. I went to great lengths to prepare it because I heard you have the ability to control blood fire." Hearing this, he nodded happily and said, "Thank you, Professor. This gift will certainly be a tremendous help to me." Kim In-on suddenly inquired, "One more thing. I wanted to ask if you intend to register for the elective course that I'm teaching." He replied calmly, "Are you referring to the basic research on equipment class?" This slightly surprised Kim In-on. "You know about that course?" Se-jun casually affirmed, "Yes, I do." In his mind, he assessed, "That's one of the classes Babel invests in with the largest budget." Se-jun was a bit bewildered. What should I do now? Before I traveled back in time, I had never heard the name Kim In-on, so it's very likely the ending for this professor wasn't very good. However, right now, he's a professor who's receiving a lot of attention. Then, Se-jun spoke cheerfully. I've decided to take that course, sir. Kim In-on asked with concern. Are you sure you'll be all right? I see you've already registered for quite a few elective courses. But he explained calmly. If I add this one, it will only be my fourth. Kim In-on didn't say anything further, shaking Lee Se-jun's hand with admiration. Well then, I look forward to working with you. He replied politely, me too, sir. At the same time, the system displayed a notification, now extracting a bond from the target, Kim In-on. The bond with the creator Lee Se-jun is currently at level 1. Bond, Kim In-on, high-grade flame-bearing iron, medium-low quality, a type of metal that contains a flame within. It has properties closely resembling wood, with the ability to store fire inside. Se-jun thought to himself pensively, if a person can extract metal from another's body, it means they can also forge and temper the human body itself. When multiple types of elemental mana coexist in one body, they will clash with each other. Because this is extremely dangerous for a blacksmith who requires absolute precision, it has become an unwritten rule to use only the one attribute that best suits your aptitude. However, I myself am a completely different case. The internal mana used to block the heat is being appropriately depleted. Once the body is empty of mana, it will begin to draw the essence of the crimson flame inside. What I need to do as a blacksmith is to establish a specialized mana circuit exclusively for the crimson flame right inside my own body. A moment later, Lee Se-jun let out a sigh of relief. He understood clearly that only by doing this could he perform forging within himself. System notification. Your elemental mana has been strengthened from F-rank bloodfire to E+ rank bloodfire. A series of notifications rang out. You have learned the S-rank skill named Soul Body Forging. The body is the most primitive material a blacksmith can polish. When the mana circuits within are forged, physical abilities will increase and strength will be enhanced. All base stats have increased significantly due to the skill's effect. Lee Se-jun. Strength, D15. Durability, done 100. Mana, D19. Speed, 87. Lee Se-jun gritted his teeth. Appraising spirit forging magic? He remembered how much he'd struggled in his past life when Leah questioned him. You already have the materials, yet you're thinking of giving up without even considering how to use them? She'd asked with a probing smile. You're not an idiot. Are you really just going to accept things as they are? Back in the present, he smiled, satisfied with his newfound determination. That's right. I have to make full use of everything I possibly can. And this time, whether they're an ally or an enemy, I will make sure I have zero regrets. In a large, stone building, a voice rang out. Today, we will finish the items you have been crafting in the past few classes, because these completed products are scheduled to be supplied both inside and outside the academy. The man with red hair stood before everyone, with his hands on his hips. So I can say with certainty that today's results will determine the entire outcome of this first semester. Therefore, give it your all so you have no regrets. Is that clear? Everyone shouted in unison. Yes, sir. Lee Se-jun observed the iron bar in his hand, thinking, everything's a real mess. Because my current body can't keep up with my reflexes, a lot of the details are off. He held a hammer in one hand, thinking, this is no time for me to be taking it easy anymore. Flames erupted, and waves of fire surged through the area. A pot of water boiled, letting off steam. Se-jun quietly observed the long bar in his hand. A result like this should be acceptable, but he seemed to grow anxious. With the time I have left, finishing the other items will be extremely difficult. If I just make everything at an average level, I might get more funding. He placed the bar on the whetstone, but in the end, pouring my heart into creating at least one truly high-quality piece is the right way to go. His hands moved deftly, sharpening the iron bar as he stood there, completely focused. A sound swelled in Lee Se-jun's head, a sound like the approaching apocalypse. His gaze was fixed on his work. Every time I hear this distinct sound, I manage to craft incredible items. He poured all his focus into it, thinking, this isn't just temporary sharpness, but a blade's edge carved into its very essence. A flash of white light revealed its name. The information became clearer. The longsword, white light, was finally complete. A great blacksmith reveals their will through the most fundamental acts. The technique of an artisan who can draw out a material's maximum potential to create a new blade is truly first class. A notification appeared. You have acquired the skill, white light style. 2 gleaming swords appeared, along with their information. White light longsword, rarity, rare, quality, high. This is a longsword that possesses a pure, snow-white blade. The exquisitely honed blade, combined with a precise mana arrangement, makes it both incredibly durable and exceptionally sharp. A masterpiece created by a smith of outstanding skill. Its slashing power increases when infused with mana. Se-jun held the newly crafted weapon and sighed in relief, thinking, considering I only used ordinary iron, This result is more than acceptable. Looking at the weapon gave him hope. It felt like his skills from before he traveled back in time were slowly returning, even if just a little. Two knights standing behind him held their swords anxiously, looking as though they were about to cry. I really hate this feeling. Maybe I should consider dropping out? The following Saturday morning, as a red-haired man sat in a cafe, engrossed in his phone, a voice spoke up. I have to say, I'm surprised you actually want to see my enhancement techniques. Se-jun looked around as they walked. Well, to be honest, I'm also quite curious about your fundamental skills. It's pretty crowded around here, isn't it? Leah, walking beside him, was also observing their surroundings. Don't worry, my workshop is in a much quieter area. The two of them made their way to a peaceful farm district. He spoke up. Isn't this place a little too far out? She replied. Did you really think you could get a look at my techniques that easily? She pulled him into Agaquif Metalworks. This is it. She walked in and called out loudly, Grandma! Her voice echoed. I'm here! Helena, sitting inside, grimaced while cleaning her ear with her pinky. I'm not deaf. You don't have to yell like that. Se-jun followed her in. The old woman asked, seeming annoyed. And who's this brat you brought with you? Your boyfriend? Leah, standing in front of him, replied, Of course not. A small smile appeared on his face as she continued. He's the top student of the mystics department who just enrolled this year. The old woman retorted, Babel must really be going downhill if they're accepting such a frail-looking kid. Helena then pushed herself up from the table. The name's Helena. Se-jun then introduced himself. I'm Se-jun, a first year in the metallurgy department. She seemed to get angry. All right, enough with the small talk. Get to work. There's a huge backlog of jobs this week because of you freshmen. Leah sighed and looked away. Yeah, I know. The old woman pointed to the room behind her. The entrance to the forge is this way. Looking at the items in the room made Se-jun think. That woman, her skills are far deeper than I thought. He followed behind her, observing carefully, deep in thought. I can't understand why someone like her is running a metalworks shop in a place like this. Leah, who was walking ahead, picked up various items and remarked, The work really has piled up. A colorful tray was set on the table. This is the enhancement palette, and these are powders ground from magic stones. He stood with his arms crossed, glancing over and thinking, I know the standard is 8 colors, but she's using them in such a variety of ways. Then he spoke up. Is your job to restore damaged enhancement formulas with this? Helena picked up a paintbrush. Exactly. She held a pan in one hand and dipped a brush into the palette with the other. This way, I can make money and do all the enchanting I want without having to worry about the cost of materials. The colorful lines she painted shimmered, making the bottom of the ordinary pan look extraordinary in her hands. Se-jun stood and watched in silence. He thought, I came here because it looked like she was hitting a plateau with her work. He recalled a memory of someone saying to him, a has-been who fails every exam and can't even keep her spot as the top student in her department. The image of Helena, engrossed with her brush and pan, sparked an idea in his mind. Just as I suspected. Now that I've seen it for myself, I think I've figured out the cause of her slump and the solution. As these thoughts crossed his mind, he turned and walked away. Being able to immerse himself in his work like that is a talent in itself. He stood before a wooden table, hands in his pockets, when an item on it caught Se-jun's eye. This thing resonates with a mana arrangement to create a special effect. He leaned in for a closer look. Well, it's been a while since I've engraved white light. My hands are itching to try it. Seeing this, Helena, who was standing behind him, said, Go on, try using it. She frowned from behind him and said, Of course, if you think you have the skill for it, feel free to pick anything from that pile over there. He glanced back in surprise, thinking, It feels like she's deliberately ordering me around. He turned his head to look. If I'm allowed to use a special whetstone of that quality, I definitely have to give it a try. Then his eyes locked onto it, and his hand grasped its handle. She watched from behind with her arms crossed. Are you really going to work on that thing? Se-jun excitedly touched the knife's blade. Yes. Looking at how evenly the blade is worn and how the shaft isn't twisted at all, you can tell this belongs to someone who truly understands how to use a blade. He stood at the table holding the whetstone, thinking, with this type of whetstone, the mana particles are compressed in the most uniform way. If I use this, it'll be powerful enough to handle sharpening the blade to its absolute sharpest limit. With a light and skillful touch, he placed the knife on the whetstone. Helena wondered from behind, is that kid really a new student who just enrolled this year? Leah, standing behind them, excitedly shouted, startling her. It's all done. She was startled, and just then noticed, Oh, Grandma, when did you get here? Without turning her head, Helena replied, I have no idea. This girl. She walked up beside her and looked over. You were trying to find fault with your junior, but he ended up teaching you a lesson, didn't he? Helena shoved her back with her arm and said angrily, Will you just shut up? She looked towards a hesitant Se-jun. Are you finished with your work? He smiled and replied, "For now, this is the best I can do. Next time, I'll definitely do even better." Helena immediately swung the sword down. "All right then, you two should get going." Leah linked arms with him as they walked out, glancing back inside and saying, "She's just being grumpy for no reason. Let's go." Inside, she stood with her hands on her hips where he had just been working. Suddenly, a man in a sharp suit slapped the door. "Sis, are you forging something?" Helena peeked out with a scowl. "Keep it down." He quickly rubbed his head in embarrassment. "The orders are really piling up. What about that kitchen knife?" Losing his composure a bit, he blurted out, "When are you going to give up that restaurant job? You're supposed to be a professor in the combat department, for crying out loud." She retorted irritably, "Stop nagging me about my hobbies." He walked in and picked up the knife from the table. "Ah, here it is." Suddenly, he sensed something unusual and frowned, turning to look. "Sis, were you drinking while sharpening this again?" She stood there with her arms crossed, head down. "I didn't do that," he continued. "Then, is this the work of those new assistants you've gotten close to recently? Their skills must have improved by leaps and bounds." Helena, with her eyes closed and head bowed, said, "It was a new student." He turned, not believing his eyes. "What?" Her eyes opened as she replied, "A kid from the new class that just enrolled this year is the one who sharpened it." Remembering the image of Se-jun, he muttered, "Who in the world is that guy?" As Se-jun walked outside, he asked, "That old woman at the metalworks shop, was she really a former instructor in the metallurgy department?" Walking beside him, Leah replied, "That's right. I heard she retired 5 years ago and opened this shop in the suburbs." He glanced down at her. "Is there some hidden story behind that?" She glanced over as well. "I'm not sure either. It's probably nothing too special." An image of the academy appeared as she spoke. "In the last 5 years, quite a few professors have left the metallurgy department." He looked over and replied, "Is that so?" Se-jun's mind was racing. Considering this place is destined to become Babel's weakest department in the future, this is definitely a story I can't ignore. Leah, walking beside him, put a hand to her chest and asked, "More importantly, what did you think of my enhancement technique?" He was startled and looked down at her. "Your fundamentals are flawless, for sure. It's pretty good." Her face beamed with pride. "Oh my, that's nothing special." His mood suddenly dampened as he said, "However, your way of thinking is still too narrow." The sky seemed to darken as Leah jumped in front of him. "What did you just say?" Se-jun pointed straight at her. "You've already thought of better methods, but you don't dare to use them." She stammered in reply, How could you possibly know that?" Leah looked like she was falling into a depression, listening to his critique with her head down. "If you don't know something, you can learn. But knowing and still not being able to do it. And that's the real problem. A craftsman's imagination is their weapon and their gift. Yet you're holding yours back." It felt like her world was shattering. "Do you think I do these things just because I don't understand it?" Se-jun winked, sighed, and started looking for something in his coat. Then he pulled out a sword, surprising her. "I have other plans, so I can't demonstrate for long. Watch carefully." He then used a stone under the water as an example. Let's say someone asks you to place a stone beneath the water's surface. Creating the stone and dropping it in is the blacksmith's job. The image of it slowly faded, but engraving the image of that sinking stone onto the water's surface, that is the art of enhancement. That's why enhancement always carries the essence of dreams. A sword appeared, with red lights of blood fire swirling around it. The sword flew before his ear unexpectedly, power coiling around it in the white light sword technique. A powerful image of it appeared. Don't just affect the outer shell, but bestow that enhancement deep into the weapon's core. He observed the sword in his hand as power swirled around it. If one layer isn't strong enough, break it down into multiple layers. Se-jun's hand swiped it down sharply. When you do it this way, he stood there and threw it forcefully behind him, planting it straight into the ground. It plunged straight into the ground. Everything seemed to stand still before that power. He looked down, thinking seriously. Even though I can't say this is a standard enhancement technique, but for someone like Leah, seeing her with a hand to her chin reinforced his thought. Geniuses like her tend to find their own way, even when they're hesitating. Suddenly, Leah pointed behind him in a panic and said, "Junior, let me borrow that thing for a second. Please, let me borrow it." She hung off Se-jun, pleading, "I promise I'll finish it perfectly and bring it back. Please, please, I'm begging you." He was sweating bullets before he finally handed the item over. "It's no trouble, but if you're taking that, take this too." She jumped for joy, as if she'd just been confessed to. "Thank you so much. I love you to death." She then vanished, leaving him all alone. Se-jun breathed a sigh of relief when he received a notification. Establishing a link with the subject Leah Claudel. Link level with creator Se-jun has now reached level 1. He muttered, "That girl really is childish." Standing in the crowded campus, Se-jun looked around and thought, "So today's the day I finally get to meet one of the 3 hounds. A legendary battle between the Mad Dog and the light-extinguishing demon god in their youth. He was thinking about how Erica was following him, but more importantly, he finally turned and asked, "What are you doing?" She whispered ominously, "Just following you, of course," he replied indifferently. "So if I told you to go somewhere else right now, would you?" She stepped up to walk beside him. "Of course I would. I can just watch you from a distance." Se-jun glanced back and let out a sigh. "I figured you'd do that." He started walking. "Come on, let's go inside." An item appeared, a frozen snowstone, with the description, Erica's social contract link, rarity, rare, quality, medium. An artificial ore containing refined magical power, it has the effect of regulating magical turbulence when mixed with other minerals. Another magic stone also appeared with a notification, Leah Claudel's complex explosive mass link, rarity, rare, quality, superb, a sharp multicolored mineral ore. It serves as an excellent amplifier, helping to unlock the maximum potential of mixed materials. In the vast stadium grounds, the adorable Jian appeared on the projector screen. "A warm welcome to all the new students of Babel Academy. You've arrived at our famous martial arts stage. I send my sincerest greetings to all of you for this ranking match." She posed, winking on screen. "I am the youngest professor in the martial arts department, and I'll be your commentator for today. My name is Jian Pong." As a spotlight shone down, her voice rang out. "Now, without further ado, let's introduce today's fighters." The tall figure of a woman appeared under the lights. "First, let's look over here. The top student of the 4th year from the Agoff region. She is also the future successor to the Myers family, which is renowned for producing S-rank heroes." The woman casually brushed her silky golden hair back. A flawless superhuman, who has continuously broken records and held the #1 spot at the martial arts stage for the past 3 years. She is currently an active A-rank hero and our reigning champion. The girl's beautiful face was revealed. She is also known as the Sword Saint. The last person to successfully conquer the highest peak of the Hero's Tower, Arya Myers. A loud roar erupted from the crowd as Se-jun and Erica watched from above, arms crossed. "Big sis, I love you. Arya, you're so dazzling," Jianfeng continued. "And now, for the first challenger to dare stand against our champion today." The spotlight shifted to a man with a long spear on his back. The living cultural heritage of the Han Baumut Kingdom, the inheritor of the scorching ember wheel spear technique. The top student of the 3rd-year spearmanship department, and a strong candidate for the 10th rank on the martial arts stage. Se-jun looked down, thinking, "So, we finally meet." The man stood there, radiating power. "The Mad Dog," Jian shouted his name, Yom-seon-ha. Fiery thrusts from his spear stopped just short of hitting the ground. On the other side, Arya skillfully controlled her sword, launching an attack that sent him leaping backward. He gritted his teeth, struggling. His hand tightened on the wooden shaft of his spear as Arya's eyes glinted menacingly. Then, flames swirled in a circle around her, looking as if they would attack Seon-ha directly. Watching from above, this made Se-jun think. Even taking his young age into account, he still doesn't meet the required standards. Could it be that he isn't receiving support befitting the heir to the scorching ember wheel spear technique? He wondered, as Seon-ha brought his spear back into a stance. There are a lot of things that feel off, but the biggest hindrance is the equipment he's using. But his opponent just tossed it aside and prepared to charge. A long, sharp sword thrust just missed his neck. Yom-seon-ha looked bewildered at the blade pointed at his throat, and his voice dropped low. "I have lost." Arya held her sword before her, smiling cheerfully. "You worked hard. The official match is over. The final winner is Arya Myers." The two of them stood on the same stage. Jian held the mic and continued her commentary. "Next, we will proceed with the interviews for both fighters." That was the plan. But student Yom-seon-ha had to leave early due to an unforeseen issue. She covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. Having to face the 9th rank right after would be too much. Even for me. Yom-seon-ha slipped away quietly, while all the spotlights were on Arya. "How about I fill this empty time with a live Q&A session with me?" The audience above was ecstatic. "Yes, please." From his seat, Se-jun glanced over and thought, "That guy looks really upset." He suddenly stood up, causing Erica to turn to him. "Are you leaving without watching the rest of the match?" He put his hands in his pockets and replied, "Yeah, I'm not a big fan of that fighting style." As he walked away, he added, "Look at her. She seems pretty antsy standing there, doesn't she?" Erica turned to look, a little worried. "It's a relief to know you didn't come here to see your brother," she thought. But why did he seem so angry? Suddenly, a voice spoke up beside her. "An interesting new student, you say? When did Arya get there?" Her orange eyes gazed hopefully into the distance. "Perhaps. I've finally found someone like that." Seon-ha was meditating in a park near the martial arts arena. Se-jun quietly approached, thinking, the current Yom-seon-ha is still alive and quite healthy. Se-jun was replaying the moment he unleashed his flashy techniques. Even if his personality is a bit dog-like, he's still a key member of the Suicide Squad. And he was the last one to sacrifice his life to destroy the demon god of extinction. Standing behind him, Se-jun thought, because he hasn't become too corrupted yet, maybe I can collect the link stone more easily this time. Meanwhile, the meditating man frowned, his head still bowed. You were watching the sparring match just now, weren't you? With his hands in his pockets, Se-jun replied, That's right. I watched a little. The man glanced back slightly. The fact that you were able to find me here proves your skills are nothing to scoff at. Se-jun turned with a sinister look. You again? Why is the top student of the magic department here? He stood there, concerned, thinking, why is he being so hostile? Then he spoke up. I came here hoping we could discuss something. The man turned away. Get out of my sight. Se-jun slowly stepped forward. This will actually benefit you, senior. He suddenly sat down, frowning. Maybe you still don't get it, so I'll only say this once. I absolutely despise the weak. Don't stand in front of me, especially those who can't do a single thing right. And don't even get me started on those who mistakenly believe their petty tricks are on my level. So whatever you want to talk about, just turn back. The words left him stunned. You lowly blacksmith. He remembered what Se-jun had done in the past. Go back to your workshop and forge your equipment. Know your place and stay there. This didn't bother him too much. Compared to when he was known as the Mad Dog, he was actually being quite polite now. Se-jun gathered magic in his hand while thinking. Looking at that attitude, I know for sure words won't solve this. Se-jun glanced back. Looks like you're determined not to back down, huh? He approached the spot where Se-jun was casting and said, Let me tell you something too. The next developments left the man stunned. The history of the Hoaluantan Huathrung will end at my hands. With that, Se-jun shot forward. He clenched his fist, unleashing his power. His punch, aimed at Se-jun, was blocked by the boy's own power. A notification appeared just as he was knocked back. The link seal of greed has been activated. He frowned in confusion, thinking, did he just nullify my magically enhanced punch? Flames swirled around Se-jun as he focused on the boy. He really lives up to his reputation as the department's top student. Maybe, just maybe, he's finally worthy of speaking to me. His demeanor grew more intense. However, the trajectory of the lingering ember mana still remains. This is the true power of the Hoaluantan Huathrung. It all ends right here. The two of them charged straight at each other. Se-jun seemed to create a blaze just to hurl flames at Se-jun. Smoke obscured Se-jun, then he slowly emerged from it. From a distance, the other man was somewhat surprised. What? How can the flames that should only react to my mana be held in his hands? Don't tell me. These terrifying things approaching me. He separated them and stole them. Suddenly, a flame grazed his neck. He looked forward and thought, this bastard. Se-jun, surrounded by his purple aura, took a fighting stance, making Se-jun think. He looks like he's about to go crazy and lose control. An image of a pink-haired man with a weapon on his shoulder in front of the disaster gate at Wahomun. It probably erupted because of that hot-headed personality of his. A punch from the man was about to be thrown. It shot forward with precision, making its target think, the effect of the seal of greed is about to disappear, and my stamina has reached its limit. As the fist is about to hit my face, the duration of the seal of greed will run out, and my body won't be able to hold on any longer. They fell as if gravity had ceased. At the same time, he caught Se-jun's punch, much to the man's surprise. But no, it was Jack who was, forcing his way forward to block the punch, startling him. Jack Myers, he exclaimed, then asked, Are you acquainted with the top student of the magic department? He stammered, Why, yes, we kind of know each other. After that, the man pulled his hand back. He walked to a calmer spot. Leave this place at once. Jack Myers shouted awkwardly, Yes, sir. Then he turned to Se-jun and said, Se-jun, let's get going. When he saw Se-jun glaring, his face turned pale with fear. Remember what I said. Don't spout that strange nonsense again. Now hurry up and get out of here. Elsewhere, Se-jun stood alone with his thoughts. I just couldn't control my emotions and threw a punch. I almost tarnished the honor of the Hoaluantan Huathrung and brought trouble upon my master. His gaze fell. On the street, Jack was walking ahead of him. What in the world were you thinking? Picking a fight with that senior? If I hadn't stopped him in time, you might have actually been killed. Se-jun lowered his head and sighed in relief. Me? It wouldn't have been that easy. Jack walked beside him, worried. What did you just say? A notification appeared before his eyes. A link with the target Se-jun has been successfully established. He then said aloud, I was just making a threat to him earlier. Thoughts also formed in his mind. The next step is to extract the link stone. He thought of Se-jun's fierce fighting style. However, the person I used to know was the mad dog Se-jun. If he's still this soft, the effectiveness of the link stone might be altered. I need to figure out a way to increase my link level with Se-jun. Then he looked at Jack and thought, still, This guy seems like he could be very useful. He also asked, "Is your hand injured?" The boy beamed, pointing at the wound on his palm. "It's fine. My hands are naturally tough." Se-jun, walking beside him, glanced over and thought, his hands are tough? How ridiculous. Suddenly, Jack turned to him with an attitude. "More importantly, what did you say about my sister back at the arena?" Se-jun was a bit surprised. "You mean, Arya Myers?" Jack replied. "That's right," he answered. "It was nothing much. I just thought she was a little arrogant." Jack Myers clutched his head in absolute terror. "What? No wonder she kept pestering me with questions about you." Se-jun stood there thinking of Arya. She's definitely started to notice me. Se-jun's face grew cold as he recalled the woman's appearance. Jack continued. "My sister seems to have taken an interest in you." The sister in question, Arya, was shown smiling. He sighed helplessly. She heard that in the middle of a noisy crowd? Her hearing is insane. Jack tried to reason with him. "Next time, please just speak softly. My sister is an A-rank hero, after all." With his hands in his pockets, Se-jun said sarcastically, "Actually, if it's just simple curiosity, I'd be more than happy to welcome it." He looked over at Jack, who was frustratedly pulling at his hair, and thought, Yeonseonha's biggest obsession is probably defeating Arya. If I can attract the attention of her rival, my own influence will naturally increase. Jack made a weary face and sighed. "Don't take this so lightly. You have no idea what my sister is really like." Before he could finish, Se-jun suddenly cut in with a blunt remark. "Petty and full of schemes, right?" Jack Myers jumped reflexively, glancing around. "Well, maybe you shouldn't use such harsh words." Suddenly, his face turned grim. Se-jun fell silent when asked, "But why do you have such a grudge against my sister?" The girl in armor, with golden hair, wielding a powerful black sword. The sword saint, Arya Myers. She stood like a monarch, facing the monsters head-on. This, too, was once a soulless and dull sword. Beneath the deep black moon, Arya spread her wings and raised that sword to the heavens. Then one day, the sword saint suddenly vanished without a trace. And the one who appeared in her place was the person who turned a demon god's relic into their own weapon, the light-devouring demon god. In the shadows, Se-jun just gave a faint smile. "I can tell she's trouble just by looking at her." Then he just casually walked away, giving a dismissive wave. "I'm out of here." Jack stood there stunned, still not understanding what was going on. What just happened? He was suddenly drawn by a ping from his phone. On the screen was a message from his sister, Arya Myers. "It seems you've made a very interesting friend. Tell me all about it later." He jumped in shock after reading it. Does she mean I have to be the bridge between those two from now on? Suddenly, his eyes froze, and his face went pale. Arya had sent a message with a shady, hidden meaning. "Your petty and scheming sister is just asking for a little favor." Jack stood alone on the street, exhausted, reading the message. Damn it. The scene changes to the next morning, in a lecture hall at Babel Academy. Se-jun sat in class, placing a hand on his aching shoulder. "Did I go a little too far confronting Yeonseonha yesterday?" Han, sitting at the desk in front, mumbled. "The schedule for the exchange event will be set soon." Professor Riss, holding a staff, burst into the classroom on a tiny vehicle and yelled, "Everyone, quiet down." He came to the front of the class, raised his staff, and gave a swift introduction. "My name is Professor Riss. I'll be in charge of your specialized classes for the next 2 weeks. My curriculum will revolve around attribute refinement." The students in the room turned pale when they saw him. They all had the same thought. This professor was famous for being a complete lunatic. Professor Riss, however, spoke calmly and seriously. "Before we begin the lesson, I have an announcement. You must all make good use of this opportunity and submit your assignments to me by next Thursday. First up, David." David, startled, immediately answered. Yes, Professor. I'm here." The tiny Professor Riss held a piece of paper, sitting comfortably on his vehicle. "And the last person on the list is Se-jun." Hearing his name called, he stood up. Han, sitting in front, glanced down. "I wonder how much money he's gonna get." The person next to him had a similar thought. "I have a feeling he'll get at least 3 times more than I did," Professor Riss suddenly announced in a loud voice. As for Se-jun's budget, it hasn't been officially announced yet. He was taken aback when he heard that. "What did you say, sir?" He had intentionally let his hair hang over his eyes because people kept criticizing his old hairstyle as outdated and ugly. Professor Riss was very calm, even stroking his white beard, because the level of completion on the product you submitted was exquisite. It far exceeded expectations, so the school has decided to enter it into the public auction for second-year students this Wednesday. He continued to explain the reason. "Therefore, we will determine your budget based on the final bid. Please be patient for just a little while longer." Se-jun stood there, frowning in thought. Is this some kind of trick from Vice Principal Michael? He's intentionally intervening to handle my case separately. His mind was still racing, thinking about it. But on second thought, If there was really something fishy going on, Professor Kim In-on would have definitely stepped in to stop it by now. He then responded to the professor, "I understand the situation perfectly, sir." Professor Riss, not looking so scary now, gestured for them to move on to the next lecture. The topic we'll be studying today is residual magic. An outstanding student has volunteered to assist me with this in-depth practical session. Please, come in. And that person was Yom Seon-ha. He appeared, walking into the classroom as Professor Riss introduced him to the class. "This is my temporary teaching assistant, Yom Seon-ha, a third-year spearmanship major here at Babel Academy." A student next to Lee Se-jun exclaimed in surprise. "Why is that famous upperclassman suddenly here?" Heh. People in class are getting as excited as if they just saw a pretty girl. Yom Seon-ha came to a stop right next to the professor, who then continued the lecture. "That's enough for introductions. Let's master the basic concepts before moving on to the practical application." He was referring to the round, magic-emitting specimens used in weapon crafting. The form of residual magic is primarily divided into two types. The first type is the basic energy charging form. The second is an independent form, capable of generating its own magic or absorbing it from the surrounding atmosphere. Both have their own pros and cons, but the independent type is significantly more difficult to handle. Professor Riss explained the theory in a serious tone. The reason is that there is no fixed standard for creating a magic core. It changes depending on the materials, the technique, and the creator's own source of magic. He glanced at Yom Seon-ha, standing beside him, and continued, "Therefore, all of you will start with the charging type first. Assistant, if you please." His hand began to clench, tensing up as it radiated a red magical energy. A stream of red magic began to appear in the classroom. Fire-type energy is inherently explosive, making it difficult to turn into usable residual magic. He created 2 lines of red magic that met in an arc. However, if you can control that nature, it reveals excellent storage capabilities. Professor Riss continued his explanation, following the demonstration created by Yom Seon-ha. A prime example is the technique my assistant is demonstrating right now. The Spear of the Raging Fire Wheel. Han froze in astonishment watching the display. To be able to control fire magic to that degree? The student next to him was just as amazed. "I can't even properly control a forge." On the podium, Professor Riss held up a device. "Since we are fortunate enough to have such a talented assistant, we must make good use of this opportunity. Please submit your assignments by next Thursday." The requirements he laid out are written clearly on the whiteboard. The topic requires excess fire-type mana in a charging form, with the motif of a fire wheel. He continued to remind them carefully, "You all can create whatever you like, as long as you stick to this theme." Riss, sitting in his small vehicle, looked excited as he spun his staff around continuously. "Now, let's hurry over to the refinement room." "Oh, right. Don't forget to change into your workshop clothes." After he left, only Yom Seon-ha remained standing there. The other students suddenly got to their feet. This was their chance. Han and a few others had the same idea in mind, a golden opportunity to speak with their senior, Yom Seon-ha. He excitedly extended a hand and began, "Hello, senior." He looked very polite and was about to introduce himself. "I'm Han," but before he could finish, a gloomy aura emanated from Yom Seon-ha. "Get lost." Han didn't dare linger and left dejectedly. "Yes, sir." The atmosphere in the class suddenly turned somber. Yom Seon-ha stood motionless in one spot, with a cold expression and his eyes closed. Those sharp eyes suddenly snapped open, looking in one direction. As Lee Se-jun was nonchalantly getting ready to leave the classroom, paying him no mind, Yom Seon-ha spoke. Lee Se-jun stopped and was met with a question. "What do you know about me?" A swirling red mana radiated from the man's powerful, muscular body. "I heard that the mastery of the scorching fire wheel is determined by the number of fire wheels. Leon, the current master of the Blazing Fire sect and an A-rank hero, has reached 8 wheels. Lee Se-jun answered as he walked more slowly toward the door. "Since the 3 wheels you just created were so effortless, if you were to do it properly, you could absolutely maintain 6 of them at once." Yom Seon-ha said, quickly walking to catch up with him. "Wait, so what about it?" Lee Se-jun suddenly spoke, making him freeze on the spot. "You've reached the 7th wheel before, haven't you?" He leisurely stuck his hands in his pockets, accurately guessing. "But one day, you won't be able to maintain it anymore." Standing behind him, Yom Seon-ha trembled with anger as he stared at his back. "How does he know that when I haven't even reported it to my master?" His face turned ice cold, and the words that left his lips were just as chilling. "You see, I have a bit of a talent for controlling fire, but when I observed the flames you conjured, I felt something was very strange. You can't fully detonate the remaining residual power, or rather, it seems like you're letting it fly away chaotically." Yom Seon-ha moved closer and asked him directly, "Do you know what the cause is?" His face went blank and his eyes widened when he heard the reply. "I have a few guesses." But the next words out of his mouth shattered his hopes. "But I don't see any reason to tell you." Yom-seon-ha muttered in disbelief. What? Standing behind him, he clenched his fists at his sides. Name your price. Lee Se-jun didn't hesitate, holding up one finger. First, you will pay a worthy price for all my advice and help. A second finger appeared on his hand. Second, when faced with difficult decisions, you are required to consult with me. As soon as Lee Se-jun finished speaking, he started walking away. Let me know your decision before we reach the refinement room. From behind, without any hesitation or further thought, Yom-seon-ha immediately answered, I agree. His voice was serious, as he added a condition, provided you can prove it. The scene changes to another location, that afternoon at the forge. In this area, a few people wearing identical uniforms were working. Lee Se-jun was focused on picking up an item and placing it into the hot furnace. Is he forging something without even drawing a single sketch? Does he mean he doesn't need to test it first? The selected stones were placed in the kiln to bake. It was a mix of fire-type ore and dark-type ore, at a 7-to-3 ratio. Two people approached his, diligently working back, and began whispering, if he just shoves them in like that, won't all the elemental mana just vanish? Why is the top student of the department doing something so crazy? His gaze didn't waver as he focused on his calculations. The temperature was increased until the elemental mana began to leak out. Lee Se-jun quickly took off the glove he was wearing. He reached his bare hand directly into the fire, simultaneously manipulating the magical flames to contain the elemental properties. This was the heat substitution technique. Riz broke out in a cold sweat as he watched from the side. He's already performing heat substitution at this stage, so this is why Professor Kim In-on accepted the public auction application. A small smile played at the corner of Lee Se-jun's lips. To the average person, it might just look like a normal heat substitution spell. But for Yom-seon-ha, it must have been a completely different scene unfolding. And he was watching silently with wide eyes. Watch closely. A black shoe pressed down on the pedal. A source of red fire mana, mixed with a hint of black, erupted. The fire mana that was spreading outwards was drawn back inside. Meanwhile, the dark mana that was digging deeper was pushed to the outside. This way, the balance between the two opposing streams of mana was maintained, creating a perfect circle. Yom-seon-ha stood with his arms crossed, seemingly focused on observing, but feeling underwhelmed. Is that all? The pupils in Lee Se-jun's eyes spun like fire wheels. My second mana attribute was forbidden because it was thought to hinder the scorching fire wheel. Yom-seon-ha still looked confused, his eyes wide as he scratched his head. If I use it like this, I drop down to the fifth wheel. Lee Se-jun was startled to hear that. What? Yom-seon-ha created 5 wheels right before his eyes and explained, I succeeded in perfecting the black fire wheel, but I don't have enough strength to maintain 6. Lee Se-jun still had to assert. Even so, 5 black fire wheels are still stronger than 7 regular fire wheels. He looked a bit troubled, shutting his eyes tightly before turning away sharply. The Blazing Fire sect periodically sends instructors to check on the skills of the heirs active outside the sect. A massive dark circle was created for the fire mana to pass through, and if someone drops below the 6th wheel, they will be stripped of their position as an heir. Lee Se-jun nonchalantly offered the same old solution. Then just do it the old way for this one time. Yom-seon-ha, dejected, created a small circle in his palm. That won't work either. The black mana seemed to be forcefully released from behind the fire wheel. My dark mana can no longer be controlled. Lee Se-jun was also feeling a headache coming on, pinching the bridge of his nose. When is that instructor coming? Yom-seon-ha had an immediate answer for him. Tomorrow. He put a hand on his chin. He squinted, looking off to the side and thought. He'd once said that losing the successor position meant immediate expulsion, a method that could be applied in just one day. Suddenly, he placed a firm hand on Yom-seon-ha's shoulder. Hey, you. Lee Se-jun looked excited as he immediately asked a question. If your position as successor is secured, will you do something for me? He gave a short, serious reply. I can. His gaze grew serious again. Good. Se-jun broke into a smile and took out a red blackstone. Link Yik Yom-seon-ha. Top quality, high-grade red resonance blackstone. An ore where fire and dark-type mana coexist. The wavelength created by these two attributes resonates with one's internal mana. First, we're going to change your weapon. Se-jun-ha then led him to what looked like a high-end room. This is the Academy's private training room. Only those in the top 100 of the dojo, or the top 30 of their departments, are allowed to use it. Stepping inside, Lee Se-jun could only let out a sigh. What a show-off. He tapped the blue screen. You can change the interface in here too, right? I'm going to tweak it a little. The two of them stood still, watching the interface change before their very eyes. Lee Se-jun saw it, pointed, and teased Se-jun-ha. The Hua Gate interface? You miss home that much? He explained calmly. My master sent it to me, so I only use it every once in a while. He took out the blackstone, looking at it with excitement. All right then, let's start making the training equipment. With just a gentle flick, the blackstone split neatly in two. Link, top quality, high-grade red resonance blackstone. An ore where fire and dark-type mana coexist. The wavelength created by these two attributes resonates with one's internal mana. A long, sharp weapon had just been crafted. Done. Se-jun took the two spears, looking them over with some apprehension. Handling one spear was already awkward. Now he had to manage two of them. Se-jun, however, seemed perfectly calm. This is better for controlling two types of attribute mana. Se-jun stood opposite him, hands on his hips, and started giving instructions. From now on, create a fire wheel with your left hand, and release dark mana with your right. Hearing this, he looked a little surprised. Just release it? He confirmed. That's right. Se-jun closed his eyes to compose himself. His gaze sharpened. He spun the two spears in his hands, one after the other. Se-jun suddenly stopped when he realized mana was radiating from the spear. Confused, he lifted the spear and stared at it. What was that? Se-jun calmly pointed at it and explained, that means you unintentionally let the dark mana flow into your left hand. He could feel the mana radiating from the spear. It was natural for different types of attribute mana to mix and escape, but in his case, it was so chaotic that they were suppressing each other. It's probably because you've spent all this time suppressing your dark mana. Se-jun fastened a bracelet onto his wrist. So, if you can get used to handling both types of mana at once, you'll reach the sixth wheel very quickly. Wear this while you train. Se-jun looked at the bracelet on his wrist and smiled. You've got some nice gear. He then began to train relentlessly with the spears, moving through all sorts of stances. 3 hours of training passed. Se-jun watched from the side, smiling, satisfied with his progress. He's adapting fast. Could it be because this training method was devised by his own future self? He sensed through every cell in his body, observing the mana in the air to see just how talented this past version of him was. His breathing rhythm, his muscle movements, the shift in his center of gravity, the wavelength of mana flowing through his body and being released at the tips of the spears. Se-jun noticed him staring and asked curiously, "What are you staring at?" Se-jun propped his chin on his hands, feigning innocence. "What do you think? I'm just gathering data." He was taking a short break, wiping his cheek, when he suddenly froze. "I need it to craft the weapon you'll be using." Se-jun sat casually on a chair. "I'm just making this for a homework assignment, so don't get your hopes up." Se-jun turned away to avoid his gaze. Who would get their hopes up for a weapon made by a freshman? Se-jun couldn't sit still, his eyes glancing over as he watched Se-jun swing the two spears down with immense force. "Is there a reason you absolutely have to hold on to the successor position?" Without turning around, he gave a short reply. "My master wants me to become the gate master." He stood there, the two spears hanging loosely in his hands, his voice cold. "So, as his disciple, I am simply following his wishes." The one who adopted the orphan Se-jun and raised him was the S-rank hero and the first master of the Hwa Gate. A picture on the wall clearly showed the face and name of that person, Ion. When he was a child, Ion would sit beside Se-jun, patting his head and teaching him. Although he lost his powers after retiring from an injury, as a teacher and a father figure, he still held absolute influence over this guy. Se-jun buried his face in his hands, closing his eyes as he remembered when the three of them first met. "Let's all get along." Link level 3. "Yes." Se-jun narrowed his eyes, wanting to know, "Why are you helping me?" His brows furrowed as he closed his eyes tightly in thought. It was another bleak, desolate landscape, stretching from the forest to the city, the 6 great demonic realms. The areas that had been swallowed by the swamp of chaos were now teeming with demonic beasts. Se-jun sat with his legs dangling off the side of a chair, turning toward him. "I plan to infiltrate all of those demonic realms. To do that, I need people to protect me, and I need materials to craft weapons for them." He ambitiously made an OK sign with his hand, without a hint of hesitation. "If you're the next master of the Hwa Gate, your skills and finances must be pretty solid, right?" Seeing his attitude, Se-jun was at a loss for words. So pragmatic. Se-jun's expression turned serious, his brows furrowing. "Of course. We haven't known each other long. Why would I do charity work for you?" "What?" Se-jun tapped his shoulder with a spear. "Are you saying that if I accept your help, I have to pay a worthy price?" He glared, pointing a spear right at his piercing gaze. "Help me become the master of the Hwa Gate, and I will follow you into those 6 great demonic realms." A past memory was suddenly brought to life by Se-jun's own words from before. "Craft a weapon for me. From now on, I will destroy the demon gods in your place." A smile spread across Se-jun's lips as he produced a brand new blackstone from between his fingers. "You don't regret this, do you?" In the palm of your hand, that black stone is continuously generating intense magical power. Now, whether you like it or not, I'm going to make you the clan master. The red resonance black stone, link insignia, has been activated. In the main training hall on the first floor of Flavium, Kang Hyun-un appeared solemnly, accompanied by his lackeys. It's been a while, young master. I am Kang Hyun-un, a 7-ring instructor of the Hwa clan. Seon-ha noticed the 3 people behind him. Who are those people over there? Kang Hyun-un gestured to introduce them. They are all disciples personally selected by the clan master. He instructed me to help them broaden their horizons, with a sparring match between you and me, young master. He even deliberately covered his mouth and snickered as he spoke. Because you, young master, are the most talented person after the successor. But Seon-ha wasn't pleased and reminded him. Hey, instructor Kang Hyun-un. His gaze was ice cold, fixed on him. The next successor to the clan master's position has not yet been decided. Watch your words. Kang Hyun-un still had a blatant, smug smile on his face. My sincerest apologies. Perhaps I was momentarily mistaken. Kang Hyun-un extended his arm, getting down to business. So, shall we begin the aptitude test now? Seon-ha bluntly refused without any hesitation. No, let's skip that half-assed test. I request to take the promotion test to the 7th ring. Kang Hyun-un shot him a disdainful look. A fool who only knows how to train dares to dream of the clan master's seat? He recalled the words of his backer and grew arrogant. If Seon-ha wants to challenge the 7th ring, then crush him completely. No matter what happens, I will take care of it. Kang Hyun-un, standing opposite him, explained at length. From the 7th ring onwards, the test includes a direct duel with an instructor. You should also think about Grand Elder Yeom Jin-hyun at the main clan, young master. It's still too soon for you right now, young master. Seon-ha stood his ground, paying him no mind. You talk too much. Seon-ha even dared to provoke his pride. Or are you afraid of being stripped of your instructor title? Hearing this, Kang Hyun-un flew into a rage and immediately called out, Bring me my spear, now. This 7-ring promotion test will be conducted as a Hwalyun duel. He held the spear, planting it on the ground. The Hwalyun duel is actually very simple. It's a pure contest of power. Whichever side has the stronger Hwalyun wins. The condition for promotion is that you must win or, at the very least, draw. Seon-ha looked on with sharp eyes, 2 swords in his hands. As soon as the call was made, all right, let's begin. Upon seeing his weapons, Kang Hyun-un confidently covered his mouth and sneered. Using dual short spears? How unrefined. Seon-ha paid him no mind, his eyes sharp as he swung the 2 spears and charged forward with intense fire magic. Have you forgotten the clan master's order to suppress your dark attribute mana? That kind of chaotic flame will never be recognized as a Hwalyun. Seon-ha smirked after creating spinning rings of fire around himself. Let's see what the result is when we actually fight. Kang Hyun-un seemed very confident, merely swinging his spear in an arc behind him. You will definitely regret this. He got into a serious stance and began to spin out rings of fire. Light from the fire attribute mixed with the dark system flared up, obscuring everyone's view. Suddenly, his eyes widened in shock. The form of a black dragon pierced through the rings of fire and began to devour them. What the hell is happening? My Hwalyun is being swallowed. No. It's being torn apart completely? His eyes, dark with shock, widened, and just a few seconds later, the spear in his hand broke into 3 pieces. Kang Hyun-un collapsed to his knees on the ground before his shattered weapon. Seon-ha held the 2 spears arrogantly, looking down at his defeated form. You said they were unrefined? Se-jun, who was watching from behind, felt a bit regretful. What's going to happen next? What a waste of excellent materials. Seon-ha, holding the 2 spears, spoke to him. Once the promotion ceremony is held, I will be officially recognized as an instructor of the Hwa clan and the legitimate successor. Se-jun lowered his head, curious. How can you ascend to the position of clan master? Seon-ha, standing beside him, glanced over. 2 conditions must be met. First, I must reach the level of the 8th ring. And second, I must receive the approval of the majority of the other instructors. Se-jun crouched down to the ground, picking up the fragments of the spear. Even if you reach the 8th ring, do you think you can get them to agree? Seon-ha immediately affirmed with certainty. I can win their approval through duels, so that's not a problem. However, it won't be a Hwalyun duel then, so things won't be as easy as today. Hearing that, he stood up and put his hands in his pockets. Well then, it probably won't take too long. Seon-ha, standing beside him, seriously tightened his grip on his spear and said, You make it sound so easy. Se-jun just gave a casual reply. I'm just saying it seems perfectly possible. Just look at today's results. Why are you looking at me like that? He gave him a roguish look. From now on, you should worry about how you're going to pay this price. Seon-ha closed his eyes, looking calm, the corners of his mouth turning up, as if in acceptance. Just tell me what you need to settle this debt. Whether it's cash or materials, I will provide whatever I can. His voice dropped to a serious low tone. Furthermore, I have another item I want to commission from you. Se-jun was a little surprised and glanced at him. A new order already? Suddenly, Yomseonha tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand. These aren't bad quality, but I only borrowed one to submit for a class. A calculating smile spread across his face. If he can create these in just a few short hours, I'm really curious to see what kind of spear he'll forge next. Yomseonha firmly thumped his fist on Lee Se-jun's shoulder. Make me an even easier to use weapon. Lee Se-jun nonchalantly walked alongside him. Put that spear down. You almost stabbed me with it. What did you just say? Link index with target Yomseonha has increased to level 2. As the bond level increases, the relationship between the two parties will grow stronger. The current connection with target Yomseonha is transactional. Each time a transaction with the target is completed, a link stone will be formed. The crystallization speed of the link stone will increase when, during the transaction, the available stones ran out. The scene changes to a packed auction house, with a single spotlight shining on the stage. The auctioneer, looking very excited, gestures broadly as he makes an announcement. Thank you all for your patience. The second-year refining department's regular auction will now begin. Se-jun appears here, sitting in the audience. I can't believe it's this crowded on a regular day. Erica, sitting beside him, notices his clothes. Did you change up your style? He just crosses his arms and meets her gaze. Professor Kim In-on reminded me that appearances are also important, and with that, his thoughts grew more cautious. It seems the title of the department's top student really is something different. Kim In-on appears calmly under the spotlight on stage. It'll be difficult to openly control someone who's the center of everyone's attention. Lee Se-jun sits with his arms crossed, a sly smirk on his face as he observes. I'm quite curious about Michael Baumut's plan to take over the refining department. Today's theme is Iron Swords. A total of 36 items have been submitted, and we will have a special quality inspection process. Following the host's words, a white cloth is brought out onto the stage. This cloth is gyump, woven from the molten fur of an S-rank beast, the white tiger. It's soft, yet as durable as metal, and it's resistant to slashes. An assistant comes forward and strikes the cloth hard with a weapon. Thanks to that property, a loud sound rips through the room. The auctioneer points to the phenomenon just demonstrated on the floor. As you can see, in the pursuit of increasing damage output, we can easily detect items that have had their durability reduced. In this auction, we will use gyump to eliminate such flawed items. A sword is the first item handed over. And now, the first sword to be introduced is the Blue Horn by student Joseph. Murmurs begin to ripple through the crowd. Oh, that looks interesting. It seems like they've prepared everything very thoroughly. Erica glances over at Lee Se-jun, sitting next to her. Do you know why they're doing this? He analyzes. A white tiger beast with blue pupils. Most people only know that the white tiger's body is very tough, but its abilities are actually a bit more complex. Its fur, flesh, and bones all have completely different properties. In particular, its fur has the ability to replicate the sharpness of any metal weapon that touches it. So, no matter how good the weapon is, the fur will gradually wear down its durability. Erica places a hand on her chin, thinking seriously for a moment. If that's the case, wouldn't the white light longsword be at a disadvantage? Because swords that prioritize sharpness usually have very low durability. Se-jun rests his chin on his hand, his face filled with anticipation. That's exactly right. This is clearly a blatant trap aimed at me and Professor Kim In-on. But if the sword breaks here, the supervising professor's reputation will also be severely damaged. That would only happen if it wasn't crafted carefully. On stage, the auctioneer bangs his gavel. The 25th sword has been sold for 4 million. The final sword is brought out, and the auctioneer begins his introduction. And now, for the final item, sword number 36, from the first-year top student of the refining department, Lee Se-jun. The quality inspection for the white light longsword will now begin. The moment the sharp blade collides with the white cloth, a powerful force explodes outward. The man holding the hilt tightens his grip, but the sword is suddenly ripped from his control. Michael Baumut, witnessing this, freezes, his face turning pale. That was the white light longsword. It's still sharp, with only a part of the tip broken. What in the world just happened? Yeah,